Welcome to the Nottingham Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting. We have 3 hearings tonight. This is a public hearing by Zoom, and I am the chairman, Bonnie Winona McKinnon. I see Terry Bonzer. Can you raise your hand, Terry, just so people can see it's you? And I see Kevin Bassett, and I can't see anybody else on the board. Thank you, Kevin. Is Raylene here? I can't hear you either.
Yes, she's here.
Raylene is here, and Teresa?
Yes, she's here too.
I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Well, you'll have to excuse me for 1 second. I told you I was making a cup of tea and I left the water on. Hear it? Sorry. So, back to tonight's meeting. So there are 5 board members here. That is a full board for those of you who are applicants. If we did not have a full board, you would have the right to wait and have your hearing when there is a full board present. So that's why I wanted to make sure. I can't see everybody on my screen. I see a lot of people I don't really know, but only a couple of the board members were showing up in my screen. So the members of the board, since this is a Zoom meeting and we're not sitting at a table together with our name in front of us, are Raylene, can other people see Raylene? Because I cannot see her. I don't know why.
Yeah.
There you are. Okay. Would you raise your hand?
Arizona.
That's okay. I know you're in Arizona. Are you there already?
Yes. Well, no, I'm in Flagstaff still.
That's Flagstaff's a great place. The Indians call it Flag. And Teresa, where's Teresa? There she is. Okay, so these are the members of the board, myself, Kevin, Terry, Raylene, and Teresa. And you will each of you present your case to the board, you or your representative. And we have 3 hearings tonight, so we're going to take them up in order on my agenda, which begins with a case from David Laus. Is that how you pronounce it, sir?
It's Losey.
Losey. Well, I was close.
It's close. It's close.
I'm only kidding.
It's been beat up a long time.
So your case will be first, and
Yeah.
you or your representative will present your case, which I will read the application for as soon as I find it over here. I had my packet all mixed up today because I was talking to the building inspector about one of them. Okay, so case number 20013-SE-VA, an application from David W. Lazy.
It's like L-O-W.
Losey, thank you. Requesting a special exception from Article 3, Section B2A of the Nottingham zoning ordinance to permit a new home within 3.8 feet of encroachment to hydric B soils where 50 feet is required. And a request for a variance from Article 2, Section C2B of the Nottingham zoning ordinance for 76.8 feet of road frontage where 200 feet is required. The property is located at 9 Lookout Point in Nottingham and is identified as tax map 71 lot 52. So you will present your case, and then anyone will be allowed to speak in opposition to your application, and anyone will be, I'm talking about members of the public now, anyone will be allowed to speak in support of your application, and then you will be able to have the last word. And the members of the board may ask you questions at any point during your presentation. So just please be aware that if people, have a burning question, they might interrupt you politely.
Madam Chair, Kevin Bassett here.
Kevin.
Did Joanne brief you on our conversation prior to the meeting?
No, I was not
No.
able to.
She did
Okay.
not. Is this
Um,
something you would rather, you mind saying it in an open meeting?
No, I don't mind. Being an alternate, I was just asked to participate tonight. I don't feel I have had enough time to review the packages, and I'll say globally for all three cases tonight. A couple of them, doing a quick flip through, I was out of pocket since Thursday, so I didn't even really get a chance to look at it until tonight. And a couple of them, I think, deserve a site walk as far as I'm concerned. I am willing to participate, but unless I get, I'd say all information that I need tonight, I may be abstaining or not able to vote tonight. And I think it's fair to let the participants know that that's my personal situation at this time.
Well, let me add that part of the reason I was speaking to the building inspector today was to talk about one of the cases. I think it's the last one, Mr. DeBerto. Is Bob here or someone representing him?
Madam Chair, Christopher Barry. With
Where are you?
Surveying and
Oh, and you're
Engineering.
representing Bob DeBerto?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so these cases are new to the board, these types of cases. I think because previously the interpretation of the zoning ordinance was that they didn't need to come before the board, and now this building inspector has decided they do need to come before the board. I know that in the case of Mr. DeBerto's proposal, that he feels that the building inspector feels, I'm not speaking for anybody, but just from my conversation with him, he feels that the state oversees anyway, and that coming to us is, he hopes the planning board rewrites that article because he doesn't think it's necessary for them to come here since the state oversees all of it anyway. I don't have an opinion on that. I think we might need some expert counsel on this, Kevin, on any of these cases. So it would not surprise me if any or all of them were continued for 30 days so that the board can receive some education on these issues, because we honestly have no experience. And most of us aren't engineers. Maybe Kevin is, but. So does that help you see the picture here tonight, Kevin?
Yes, it does, and I just think it's fair to tell the applicants that
That it might happen.
that I'm probably not prepared to lay a decision tonight, so that they could continue to a later date
You
before
don't
we.
think they have the choice to continue if we have a full board? Am I correct in that, Joanna? I think that we as a board do, though, have the right to continue it and
Correct.
seek more education on these dredge and fill matters.
Okay, very good.
Okay. It's probably not what any applicant wanted to hear. I mean, most people have, 30 days would be another month's delay, but honestly, the board members, most of us are probably not going to feel particularly comfortable with any of these situations as presented tonight. But I think we need to go through the presentations one by one and decide on each one as it comes up. Does that make sense, Kevin?
Yeah.
And perhaps perhaps a member of the board will make a motion to continue it if we think we're in over our head. So I'm going to proceed with the first case tonight, which is case number 20-013-SE-VA. I've already read only part of it once. Application from David Loze requesting a special exception from Article 3, Section B2A of the Nottingham zoning ordinance to permit a new home within 3.8 feet of encroachment to Hydric B soils where 50 feet is required. And a request for a variance from Article 2, Section C2B of the Nottingham zoning ordinance for 76.8 feet of road frontage where 200 feet is required. The property is located at 9 Lookout Point in Nottingham, New Hampshire, and is identified as tax map 71, lot 52. So, Mr. Lozey, you're presenting your own case, correct?
Yes, I'm representing Lynn Crowell, the owner of the property.
Okay, you're not the owner. Okay, sorry. You're just the applicant and you are representing Lynn Crowell.
Yes,
I want that to be in the record, and you were denied a building permit by Mr. Sylvia. So that triggered your
yes.
board. So I will let you make your presentation to the board and let anyone ask questions who need further clarification.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm interested in buying this piece of property to build a house on the lake, on Pawtuckaway Lake. And I've done that years ago, back in 2005. I lived on the lake and built a house there before, looking to go back on the lake and looking to purchase this property. In meeting with the building inspector, I thought I just needed a special exception because of the setback, and that's one of the requests. But the other request was finding out from him that there's not enough frontage on the property. But on Article 2, Section CC states that non-conforming lots that are exempt from these provisions. Pawtuckaway Lake Shores was an approved subdivision in 1961. Eventually, like I said, was question was that, and then the road was accepted in 2000. And I'm just not sure that if that is still needed a variance on that, but I guess the building inspector thought maybe we should go for the to apply for this. And because it was a non-conforming lot before, back and these lots were approved in 1961. So that's my case on the.
Okay, can I ask you one question, Mr.
Sure.
Lewis?
Yeah,
Lookout Point Road, is that a town road currently?
it is now,
Approved in
yes.
2000, like 39 years after it was, the whole subdivision was approved.
Yes, yes, the road is accepted now. It was done in the 2000. I'm not sure exactly what year, Madam
Mhm.
Chair. I don't know what year, but it was in the 2000. The owner would know more. He's on board on this meeting also. But
I mean,
I'm
so-
not sure.
So to
exactly.
me, that is kind of the first question. I question why he's before us for a road frontage special exception variance.
I don't know. I'm just told that when we went for the exception, for the special exception, this was brought up that we didn't meet the frontage of the required ordinance today, but these were stuff that was approved before that. And I don't know why he just said we have to apply for it.
Joanna, do you have any insight?
Yes, he doesn't have 200 feet. And there isn't a house.
Oh, it's an empty lot. So therefore you think he does need one.
That was the determination, yes.
Okay. So it's a vacant lot.
Yes,
And even though it was approved as a lot in 61, it doesn't meet the specs today. So I would agree, he does need a variance.
okay. And then the second request was in doing a survey on the parcel, the lot, we found a little corner in the lower southeast corner of the lot, which was not told before, a little wet section that was down there. And we think it's just from the high seasonal water table from the lake that floods in on that lower section of the lot that came in, because there's no other wetlands around that feeds this wetland. And we just think that it was from there. But when I brought my soil scientists out and my engineers, we said it was a small wet area, and it was depicted as it is hydric B soils, and the ordinance is 50 feet setback from there. And that encroaches the house, the building of the house by 3.8 feet. However, we are more than 50, we are at the 50 feet on the state shoreline, the DES requirements, just that this ordinance requires 50 feet from a wetland, from that hydric B, and we're encroaching it, and it hinders the the house by 3.8 feet being able to be built, being that it's a tight lot and all the other constraints that we have to comply with. We're asking for an exception on 3.8 feet. And the front of the lot, which is on the water side, we don't intend to do anything to that. We just want to leave it natural, but we have this, in doing this, we found this this section that was in a wet area.
Mhm.
So just questioning on that, if that's the requirement. That's the request, is the exception, because it's 3.8 feet.
It's 3.8 feet short of the 50 feet
50 foot
required,
setback.
correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Do you happen to have any maps with you, or do we have a map on this lot? We must, in our
You
packet.
do, and Madam Chair, I can put them on the screen.
Yeah, why don't you do that?
Okay.
Always helps to have a visual.
There's the engineered plan right there. So if you look at the lower right corner of the lot, that's the little wet section that's from, we feel it's from the lake, from the, to the, is this on high water table.
The lower right by the lake, correct?
Yeah, yeah, the lower right corner where it says Pawtuckaway Lake on the map, on the plot plan.
So how much of that area is wetland?
I don't know what the square footage is. It's very small. I'm not sure what the area is. But I had it flagged by a soil scientist to make sure it was what we had to be exact, and the engineers to give us the exact dimension of the encroachment. So these are all legit dimensions. It's not just something I came up with. I made sure we have engineers do it.
Mhm.
So it does show, the arrows show the 50-foot set, the radius that encroaches the building envelope. You can see the building envelope's kind of like an L.
Mhm.
And that little radius is the area of the 3.8 feet. And it shows on the far left corner of the lot, front on the lakeside, you'll see where the 50-foot line is by the state required the Shoreline Protection Act, that we're beyond that with the house and everything. So we meet that criteria.
So we'd like you also to present your case and include the 5 criteria for the variance. And include your reasoning for why we should grant you both of these, the special exception and the variance.
Okay. The one is I thought in my interpretation of what the Article 2 CC states of non-conforming lots, I thought, being this was approved in 1961, this ordinance, the frontage was previous to the requirements today. And on the special exception, because it's 3.8 feet, I don't know, it just encroaches that envelope, and then it's tight. You can see on the right-hand side, the owner had years ago got a variance for the side setback of 10 feet, and with septic and side setbacks and frontage setbacks, and everything is real tight, and it makes it really extreme. And we thought we were going to make it, and the only thing that doesn't make it is the encroachment of 3.8 feet. Being that it's a town ordinance, it's not a state requirement, but I just was hoping that would just make it work for us so we could build that house to fit in there. It's not a big house, it just barely fits in there. And that's what I was looking to do with it. And I don't know why, but years ago, there was a building permit that was issued for this lot. And then I don't know if there's new housing going up around the area. My question was, did those people have to come in for a variance also on the frontage? I'm not sure, but I just questioned why we needed a variance for that. And then, of course, I understand the ordinance of the 50-foot radius from the Hydro B soil.
So
I'm
I've
asking
been
for-
on the zoning board for more than a decade. I think probably Terry has too. I don't
Yeah.
remember anybody coming in with this address, Lookout Point Road.
Yeah.
Joanna, do you remember any? You've been around a while. You said they're building their,
Is there some building on Lakeview Drive or anything like that, new homes going up now? Or I'm just wondering what has been the history of other lots in particular, because they're all small lots from the 60s, you know?
we have had somebody come in from Lakeview. I can't remember why, but
Yeah.
I know a couple people who live there, so that sticks in
Yeah.
my mind.
I'm not sure. We've never had anybody from the road, but I think that quarter foot thing just came in, that's somewhat new to us, I think, for the last year or two, isn't it, Joanna?
Yes, it's a new interpretation.
Right. So we didn't have to take those up a few years ago.
Correct.
Madam Chair, in the package, the approval was done August 9th, 2002.
The approval of what? The road?
Variance to Article 6, Section A2. 10 feet that was mentioned, et cetera. It's in our package.
That was 10 feet from,
I believe it's the right-hand side.
Yeah.
from that wetland, you mean?
No, it's just property line.
Okay, setback.
So
Or-
I believe what this says is that the approval to build a house, 2-bedroom year-round, was approved back in 2002.
But was that at the same dimensions with the same setback, or are we now asking for an expansion or what, decrease in the amount of setback from that offered in 2002?
Well, the 10 feet is common between the two, between 2002 and today.
Say that again?
In this, you can see in the second line, it says 10 feet, and that's what's on the drawing that Joanne just showed.
Oh, thank you.
And the setback is 20 feet?
There it is, yes,
What is the required setback?
20 feet.
20 feet.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. And I think at that time, Madam Chair, I don't know when they had that. It was, I don't even know if there was any wet area at all in that corner of the lot.
I don't think back in 2002, you needed a variance for the septic, 10 feet. That must have been a sideline variance. Joanna, could you clarify something? If you have a variance and it's not used, doesn't that only last so long?
No, variances run with the land.
Okay, that's what I just wondered. I know this.
Joanne, back in the day, one of the members, I'll say consistently put limits, time limits, be it a year, on building permits and such, as part of the decision. Do we have any other history?
I have some information that I'm not 100% certain of, but I'm pretty certain. In around 2014, the New Hampshire legislature did put a time limit on variances. I believe it was 2 years. And I believe they applied the time limit on all existing variances because they used to run with the land forever. And I believe they put a time limit of 2 years from the date of the legislation, of any that were already existing and had been around for a long time. If you didn't use them, then they expired. Does that not make sense, Joanna?
If that isn't, I have not heard that one. I can look that up. I have the ability to look it up right now if you'd like.
Yeah, I wish you would, please.
Okay.
I
I'm
think
gonna
they did it
stop
on
sharing.
variances and special exceptions, but it might have been on just one or the other.
Okay.
Dave, while she's doing that, just a hypothetical, if you was to move the house back 3.8 feet, how does that, what other parameters would that affect?
It goes beyond the back. If you look at the plot plan, it goes beyond the building envelope with the setbacks.
In what regard?
Pardon?
I'm curious, how does it,
It encroaches, it goes over the building envelope. And also it hinders the required setback from the house to septics of the leach fields of 15 feet. And it's that the building envelope, it would go beyond it. So then you're outside the building envelope. Just that's how tight it is.
Just a question, and I'm sure you have considered this. This is Raylene. When you look at the design of the house, in the constraints that we're debating tonight, is there any modification in the house that can be done to fit with? I'm sure you've already looked at that, but what's the discussion around that?
Well, the house, the dimensions, it ends up being like you lose 4 feet, and then you also got the way that envelope is set there is also, we got a roof overhang with the drippage on that has to set it back. So you can't, anything making it further back would be outside the envelope, plus it encroaches that issue. And then if we take 4 feet away from it, it's so tight constraints that you end up having like 18 feet or 20 feet, I think, of like a trailer, you know? And it really hinders in just taking the maximum amount of space that we can and still following through with the requirements, but it doesn't
many
work.
square
with
feet?
Trying to build
How
a
many-
house there.
How many square feet is your house? Do you have a design yet, Mr. Lozey?
No, I don't have a design. It's well, I have an idea what it's going to be, but it's like 1,300 square feet, something like that, plus or
That
minus.
includes, is it like a Cape style?
Yeah, it's like a cape. Yeah, it's got a gable in the front, but just a ranch on the side. It's one floor coming off the street.
So that's like a 24 by 32 Cape, more or less.
It's 40 something feet wide, but it's just it's 24, but you lose 4 feet, and you got 20 feet, and you get the roof overhang you have to worry about. So then you end up with like a 17 by 40 trailer. You know, it's very, with everything on there, it's very tight with that. And the 4 feet would definitely make it doable for the house. And like I said, I just wasn't sure when that wetland spot was occurred because from the flooding of the lake. And I don't know if it was back there in 2002 or 2004, whenever there was a permit that was pulled before. I don't know. And it's dried out. There's no water there. Of course, the lake is drawn down every year, but when I looked at the property about in 8 weeks ago, there was no water. But when I brought my engineers, it was determined that there is some ferns there, and it's a hydric V. It's created from the lake.
Well, I had Mr. Logan. What's that part that sticks back? Is that a roof or is that a room?
It's a room, yes.
Okay,
It's a master bedroom, yeah.
okay, so that's enough.
Yes.
I found the answer to the RSA question on variances.
Go ahead, Joanna.
So it says that the town shall a notice shall be posted for 1 year and shall prominently state the expiration date. And it shall state that the special exception, oh wait, that's special, sorry, I'm looking at 2 different lines here. But anyway, it's saying that we have to post it when they expire, any of them that were before August 19th of 2013.
2015, did you say?
13.
13.
Bonnie, it's
So-
on page 426 of our book.
Are you talking about the law book? I
Yes,
don't have it on my table, but is it short, Teresa?
is it short?
Yeah, I mean, is the description short? Is it something you could read in less than a minute?
Joanna read part of it already. It's in 674:33. It's B. No. Anyway, the zoning ordinance may be amended to provide for the termination of all variances that were authorized under paragraph 1 before August 19th, 2013, and that have not been exercised. After adoption of such an amendment to the zoning ordinance, the planning board shall post notice of the termination in the town hall and shall be posted for 1 year and prominently state the expiration date.
Right, but I think,
That begs the question, is it in the ordinance?
No, it's not.
So if it's not in the ordinance, then we haven't done anything to extinguish them, I would say. I'm not a
Correct.
lawyer, but that's what I would say.
but not only that, this rule was passed in 2013. I don't think you could retrospectively go back before 2013 to wipe out variances.
Well, I have a feeling that it did, but again, I'm not a lawyer. But if the town didn't take up the procedure as prescribed in the legislation, then we did nothing to extinguish them in Nottingham. And it sounds to me, Teresa, and I can't see you, but correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like the first step is to amend the zoning ordinance and to adopt some of the language of the legislation so that people are on notice that these are being terminated.
That is correct. I've
And then it's
had
done
to
at the
actually
local
look into
level.
this legally.
So if we don't have that in our zoning ordinance, and I don't remember ever seeing it. Maybe it went over the heads of the planning board and they didn't notice. Anyway, that would be my feeling. I don't know, does anyone else on the board have a different opinion about it? So then I would say that variance still stands. And does that accomplish your purpose or not? It's not a variance from a setback from the wetland, it's a variance from a sideline. But does it involve that piece of wetland or not, Mr. Lozey?
The 10 feet does not, maybe if they carried it all the way down to the front, maybe just a little piece of the front corner does. I'm not sure how that 10-foot carries all the way down on the property. The property, if you look at the plot plan, it kind of shoots at an angle back to the lake. So that 10 foot is all the way down on that whole side of the property. It might come just behind those boulders if you look at the plot plan. If you can put that back up.
Bonnie,
Yep.
in this same section of our law, if you go further up to letter A, I was reading under letter B because that's where the date was that Joanna mentioned. But it says that variance is authorized under paragraph 1, which is the powers of the zoning board and what we do for hearing and then voting based on the 5 criteria. It says shall be valid if exercised within 2 years from the date of final approval or as further extended by a local ordinance or by the zoning board for good cause, provided that no variance shall expire within 6 months after the resolution. But it sounds like there was a 2-year.
It does, but it sounds like that, in that instance, I would say, since the town, as far as we know, didn't notice that they were extinguishing old variances, that it only applies to the ones that are going forward from that date. And that's again, that's a legal question. Not really
Right, because it
qualified.
sounds like A was 2 years and then B says that they may be amended to provide for the termination of all variances that were authorized.
Right, so, I mean, I understand what you're saying to mean when we give or grant a variance, there's a 2-year window after which it expires if it's not exercised. But it doesn't say anything about variances that were before that period in time. You know, that were already on the books. It doesn't say that we extinguish those.
Correct.
So I would say this variance is way before that. They only did that language after this legislation was passed. And that it seems to me that that's how the planning board chose to deal with it, that any variances going forward had a 2-year time limit, but it did not change that the ones before that were basically eternal, that they ran with the land forever. Does the rest of the board concur with that summary, or
Well, I put my,
Kevin, what do you think?
I
You
put
have an
my,
engineer's mind.
well, I put my devil's hat on, and when it says all variances, it could mean past and present. This may be one that we should ask for some guidance on. The way I see it is, it affects the present request for the 10 feet, which we think is heritage from 2002. 2002 permitted a house, so thus by default, the frontage was accepted. And if it is heritage, you know, we would need to decide upon that. And then it's just the wetland that's on the lake side. The other side of that is that all the previous variances are null and void, and we need to review everything that has been applied for.
I don't recall anyone ever coming before us, in my memory anyway, that had an existing variance that had been on the books, like this one's been on for almost 10 years. No, 20 years almost. I mean, I don't recall having this come before us, but it is something we do need to be aware of. I do agree with you on that, Kevin. So perhaps a motion to continue this case so we can seek a legal opinion on the status of a variance. I would still argue that even though it says all variances, the legislation requires more than that simple statement to extinguish the old ones. It requires posting a notice. I don't know if they had to be listed. And I don't think that we have any evidence that that was ever done. Teresa, do you agree with that? I mean, you're reading the law book tonight, so that's why I'm going back to you and asking you if you agree with my interpretation.
I agree that we don't have any proof that variances have been terminated, having not been used. But I don't know, based on the reading of this, how this, especially with the first paragraph stating that there is an extinguishing after 2 years, is first. So I don't understand. I don't know how that plays out.
And what you're reading from, are you reading from the ordinance or are you reading from the law book?
I'm reading from the law book.
So 674-33. So maybe could you read that again? Would you mind? Since you,
I don't mind. Variances authorized under paragraph 1 shall be valid if exercised within 2 years from the date of final approval, or as further extended by local ordinance or by the zoning board of adjustment for good cause, provided that no such variance shall expire within 6 months after the resolution of a planning application filed in reliance upon the variance. And B states, the zoning ordinance may be amended to provide for the termination of all variances that were authorized under paragraph 1 before August 19th, 2013, and that have not been exercised. And then it goes on from there.
would you read that one again? That one is saying that we can amend our zoning ordinance to extinguish all variances that were authorized in the past. Is that correct?
The zoning ordinance may be amended to provide for the termination of all variances that were authorized under paragraph 1 before August 19th, 2013, and have not been exercised.
So then the next question is, did we amend our zoning ordinance to state that?
Joanne, would that be public record in around 2004?
Well, there would be some language in there even still, I would think.
Would be 2013.
No, what I meant was 2002, it was approved. Is there any evidence in 2003, 2004, whatever, that it was, if it's because it didn't happen, that it was nullified?
No, there isn't any evidence, and we have, I don't remember what year, but we did act on one variance several years ago, and nullified that one. It was for a particular Route 4 property. We have not nullified any other variances except for that one. So we did act on this new law once upon a time.
So it still seems to me that the law provides for a 2-year window during which a variance is usable. And after that 2 years, they expire. And to extinguish ones that are older than the legislation, 2 years older than the legislation, requires some action by the town vis-a-vis their zoning ordinance. And I don't think we ever did that.
The only
mean, I
thing I see with dates at all in our law, in our zoning ordinance, is for special exceptions, and there's 2 years on that.
Right. No, I think the 2-year law is clear to me. So if we give out an ordinance, if we give out a variance tonight, it has a 2-year period, so it expires in 2022, November 16th is the last day of it. But anything that was given out before this legislation requires action by the town in order to extinguish. And Joanna is saying, and I don't recall us ever extinguishing all the variances that might be out there unused. But it seems like the town didn't take that step.
Madam Chair, may I intervene?
Kevin, is that you?
No, it's the applicant, Dave Lozey.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Lozey.
My question is, if they distinguished it before, wouldn't the owners be notified that it was distinguished? Wouldn't they have gotten a notification?
One would hope.
Yeah, and
One would
so
hope.
my,
It requires somebody looking up all the variances and going through the history of the zoning board. Wouldn't you say, Joanna, that would be the only way to find them? And then checking up on everyone to see if they were implemented or not. They could have been implemented and then fallen into disuse for a couple of years, and probably that would extinguish them as well. But I don't think the way the law is written, it doesn't sound to me like we extinguished the older ones, because we would have had to take steps to do that. And I don't believe the town did. And if the town did, I believe Joanna would know about it, because she was our land use clerk at the time. Were you not, Joanna, in 2013, 14, 15 in there?
Yes, I was.
Yeah, so I suppose somebody else could have gone through the town records, but honestly, I don't even know how to do it myself. I usually ask Joanna if I need to know something. So to me, but I still think it would not be inadvisable for us to continue this case and seek a legal opinion. Sometimes, believe it or not.
I concur, Madam Chair. And there are two scenarios I see exist. If it was nullified sometime before, then the 10 feet setback on the right-hand side of the property would have to be applied for. And if it is actually valid, then we don't, in my opinion, don't have to reapprove the 200-foot frontage, which has been applied for.
That makes sense to me. So we haven't allowed anyone else to speak here tonight, and I am going to, if everyone on the board is satisfied, doesn't have any burning questions, I'm going to open the floor to any members of the public who wish to speak on this.
Did the
application.
applicant do the 5 criteria first, Madam Chair, or after?
If we're going to continue the case and he doesn't end up needing one, I'd say I would have him do it at the continuation of the case if need be.
Okay,
Because if we decide that he doesn't need either of these things he's asking for, because his old variance is still in effect,
well, you
then
still have to do the wetland variance, no matter what, right?
I think if we're gonna do a continuance, if there's gonna be a motion for continuance, we should just do it and move on. And let the public come in, when we come back for the continuance.
are there any members of the public here who wish to speak on this matter, first of all?
Yes, I would like to speak.
Sir, state your name, please.
Yeah, my name is James Kroll and my wife Lynn Kroll here. We're the owners of the property and currently residents of 22 Mountain Lane, Bartlett, New Hampshire. Prior to that, we lived at 7 Lookout Point, the abutting property for approximately 34 years. And I also served on the zoning Board of Adjustment up until 2013 when we moved from Nottingham. I'd just like to make a quick comment on the question before the board about expired variance. 2 or 3 months ago, prior to the application coming to the board, I had a conversation with Joanna and she checked with the county planner as to the variance being valid or not. And the opinion of the county planner told Joanna that the variance was still in effect. I was told that verbally, and because the town had decided not to implement the 2-year the 1-year posting as required by state law to nullify all existing variances. So ours was still in effect. That was the opinion of the county planner. And that was about 2 months ago. And I think Joanna can probably speak to that. She and I had a conversation over this by phone. So that's all I wanted to say about our existing variance. That has nothing to do with the application tonight. That these are separate variances, one for the 200-foot setback, 200-foot road frontage, and the other for the hydric soil setback. But as far as the existing variances from that we had from years ago, the opinion was that they're still in effect.
So I guess the question then for me would be, what I'm inferring from what you said is that holding up your case to get an opinion on something that's irrelevant doesn't seem like a very good idea to you.
Well, just that was the opinion of the county planner through Joanna. The variance that we already had was in effect is still in effect.
Okay. And that variance does not eliminate the need for the setback from the wetlands. It doesn't
Correct. It has nothing to
cover
do.
that area. No.
Right. It's totally separate.
Okay. So,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you for the information. And you agree with his statement, Joanna? Yes.
Yes, I do.
So we're now in a different place. Kevin, do you wish to speak to his point that the status of the variance is really irrelevant to the case in front of us?
If the board is willing to accept the, what's the wording that Jim just said was county commissioner, county person of knowledge?
Yes, she's hired by the town to advise us on land use matters, and she works for the Stratford County Regional Planning Commission. Actually, what is her position there, Joanna? Do you know?
She's a planner and she has another role too, but for us, she is a planner.
So she's hired by the town of Nottingham to advise us on land use questions and planning. So she's not just, somebody they got off the street. It's actually her area of expertise. She's not an attorney, however, but nevertheless, if the town did not take up step 2 of that legislation, then we have not extinguished the old variances anyway, and it really doesn't matter for this case. So maybe we should just move on to the 5 criteria and for the supporting information for both the variance.
And to the note about her not being an attorney, she does have access to the NHMA attorneys. And when she doesn't know the answer or doesn't get a good answer from her other fellow coworkers, she'll go to the attorneys for us. So she does still seek the advice of the attorneys as well.
So I think we should now just continue moving forward with the case. Mr. Lozzi, would you like to complete presentation of your application to tell the board why you should be granted these 2 requests, the variance and the special exception?
I'm not sure. I'm still a little confused about the frontage. I'm not sure if I understood that correctly, that if the variance was there before and was approved, then the frontage was as it was at that time and it was approved, what that frontage is? Or do we still
Well-
need a variance for that?
I think you still need a variance for that, honestly.
Okay.
I don't think that the issuance of a building permit is evidence that the question of the road frontage was taken up or not taken up, approved or not approved, and if it was, nothing happened because of it. Nobody ever built on the land.
Okay, so I'm not, so I'm just following through what they're saying, that this was an approved subdivision back in 1961. I'm not sure that with the way the lot frontage is and then in complying with today's ordinance, because of the way it was designed back then. A lot of the lots on the lake, I think, are like that. And the other one was the exception of the 3.8 feet of encroachment because of the 50-foot setback from that wet spot. And it
So,
was jeopardizing the build.
so we work under the law for special exceptions. Requires you to prove or to convince the board that you meet 5 criteria for getting an approval for a variance. So you have them down here on your application. We'd just like you to go over them and maybe flesh them out a little bit if you want to. You have to demonstrate to us that you meet all of the criteria. And if you do convince the members of the board, then the board has to vote in favor of it. If you don't convince them, they have to vote against it. That's the way the law is written.
Okay, I don't know.
So it's on it's on the back side of your application.
Yeah, no, I'm trying.
You have it? We all have copies of it.
Yeah.
Green is like the-
It's just not seeing where the application is.
Did you give him a packet, Joanna? In my packet, it's on the back of the application.
Yeah, that's the only reason I don't have that with me. I don't know where it is.
Well,
Do we vote?
Joanna's got it up on the screen.
Okay, yeah,
You can read it off the screen. Thank you, Joanna.
okay.
You're
thank you.
welcome.
Okay, the first one was the 76.52 feet of frontage where the 200 feet is required now. Is that there's just no way to obtain 200 feet of frontage. on there. So asking for that variance of the way the land is, the lot was approved and back in 1961. The lot will not be buildable otherwise, and a driveway can fit safely within a driveway. The spirit of the ordinance is observed. The driveway can fit safely without 200 feet of frontage. This is shows on the plot plan that we designed with the engineers. Number 3 is receiving this variance, I can build my new home on this lot. That's what I was looking to do with that. Being able to build on the lake and be back on the lake. That's what am I going to do with my retirement home. And at this time, the parcel was made, does not require the 200 feet ordinance. I'm not sure. And number 5 is imposing new standards of ordinance results in a hardship of pre-existing non-conforming lot. The resident of the new home as well as surrounding properties. So with all the hindrances and everything, the lot being the constraints that it has, it's really tight with it and not being able to bring it up to the new standards, the new ordinances, and what was there before. Being that I think it was a buildable lot before, but I just think that that's the hardship cape of the lot. Bearing with the setbacks and the side setbacks and the road frontage setbacks and the water setback, the DES setbacks, everything makes it just real tight for it, but it does work in the 3.8 feet from the variance of the setback from the wetland would make everything work. And then the building being more than 50 feet from the shoreline, the property in the front staying as is, not being disturbed. We just want to put a house there. That's all. That's my case.
Thank you, Mr. Lozey.
Thank you.
Do any members of the board have questions or comments?
I have a question. I keep hearing the use of the term wetland. And when you're referring to that, you're referring to the corner of the property that is wet from unknown reasons, as opposed to the technical definition of a wetland. Is that correct?
Yes, and our determination, even from the soil scientist, that it was just an area that has been through the years of being just flooded from the high season, and it's not there all the time, and it's not being fed from another wetland area because it's all dry all around it.
Right. I think that the use of the term wetland
Yeah.
here is inaccurate and confusing, because there is a very strict definition for the use of the term wetland and
Right.
the criteria surrounding observance of protecting wetlands. And I don't think that applies to this case. And the use of the term wetland raises the question of, should we apply the criteria for protecting wetlands to this situation? And I don't think we need to, because it's not technically a wetland according to the state definition of a wetland.
I don't know that I agree with that, though, only because if an area is wet after the dry year we've had, then it must be very wet when we do have our typical rainy seasons.
There's no water there now, ma'am. It's just that it is dry there, but we had done the soil test to determine if it was a hydric B because of the wet, but there was no water there this year whatsoever. It's dry. The water with all the lakes were down, as you all know from the drought. There's no water there, but it's just determined that spot, and I think it was overlooked years ago when there was probably a permit pulled before, but I don't know. I think it's just from the engineers going out there and determined that little section was flood hydric B soil because of overflow from the lake.
So does it meet the criteria for the state definition? And I must admit, I did not look at that until just now listening to it, to the use of the word wetland. Does it meet the criteria for a wetland and require the wetland protections as defined by the state?
Raylene, I don't think we can answer that without having soils testing done.
Well, they have it listed on the map. I mean, it says poorly drained, which is the least wet of wet soils. I mean, you have to have very poorly drained, and that's a 75-foot setback. So it's poorly drained, so it's only a 50-foot setback. So it's not, I agree with Raylene, it's not necessarily considered a wetland.
I just think that it's a little confusing in our data to use the term wetland if it does not meet the definition of wetland as prescribed by the state. I think later on, somebody may raise that issue did we adequately protect the wetland?
Right. I think if Mr. Losey referred to it as it says on the map, poorly drained, I think that would
Yeah, okay.
probably be better.
The special exception for the poorly drained area. That's the request.
The setback from the poorly drained area.
Yes, the setback. Correct.
Reducing it from 50 feet to 47 or 46 and a half or whatever the,
Yeah.
Do we need to have that corrected prior to making a decision?
well, he's asking us for a setback. If that were corrected, then he wouldn't necessarily need one, so he could still correct it afterwards if he doesn't get his approval, perhaps. That's possible. But are there any other questions from the board? Are there any abutters here who wish to speak?
Kevin,
Any member of the public?
I do have a comment, Madam Chair.
Pardon, I can't, is that Kevin? I can't see you. Who's speaking?
Yeah, Kevin here.
Thank you, Kevin.
Just one comment on the first, number one of the 5 criteria. The statement is contrary to public interest. The lot would not be buildable otherwise. Well, that's a not to the nth degree accurate statement. A slightly smaller house or a jog in the house to get 50 feet, you still could put a house there. A statement more like the lot was planned in 1961 to put a house of some sort there, and you're still putting a house there. So it's just the wording is not quite accurate. I'm not sure how it affects the decision-making process, but just a little guidance. Maybe the wording could be revised.
Kevin, I agree with that. I had the same question or the same thought. Let me ask the group. We've now raised 2 issues. One is the definition of the wetland, and now it's revision. Is tonight the night to make a decision, or should we review these and have it resubmitted, the language corrected?
Well, I think the answer to the rationale that he gave for the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. Is an individual decision for each member of the board, and is not really something, we can ask him to expound on it tonight, and maybe he's willing to do that. Because some members of the board, Mr. Losey, don't feel that your statement actually proved that it wasn't contrary to the public interest, which is not your interest as a homeowner necessarily. You know what I'm saying? That you're not harming the public interest by your request. If you can expand on that a little bit, maybe it would satisfy these 2 board members who are raising an issue with the way you answered that criteria.
Madam Chair, can I interrupt for a moment?
Yes, you may.
He was only reading the variance criteria. He did not get to the special exception criteria, which addresses the hydric B soil question. The variance criteria only addresses the setback, the road. So if you're ready, I can put up the special exception criteria.
Is everybody clear on that? And do you still have an issue with his statement in number 1? Why would adding another building, why is that not contrary to the public interest? Do you want to expound on that, Mr. Lozey?
I'm not sure I know what you mean, Madam Chair.
So 2 members of the board didn't feel that your wording met the criteria for showing us or convincing us that it's not hurting the public interest for you to be asking for this variance.
Why can't I control this?
Joanne, would you clarify that? We talked about that, Joanne.
Joanna,
Joanna,
The variance would not be contrary to the public interest because it would not be buildable otherwise. I don't remember what we talked about.
so the public interest are things like health, safety. Would it harm the public interest in any particular way? Would it harm the environment? Would it harm the ability of safety vehicles to reach your neighbors? Would it, that kind of thing is what I believe the question is looking for, Mr. Lozey.
Right.
The public interest would be, the quality of the lake, the quality of the environment of the lake and the surroundings of the lake, and the other issues that relate to the public interest, like health and safety.
I don't think with the way it's set up, whether it would be in the building envelope and where the house has to go, that it would jeopardize any of that.
I think, I just want to say one thing. I think Joanne is right. I think, Kevin and Raylene are kind of putting this on the 47 feet or the 46 feet is from the special exception. What he's saying here is if he has to have 200 feet of frontage, the lot is completely unbuildable, and he is correct. Referring to the frontage.
I think we should go on and let him talk about the special exception, which is the main part of this meeting right now.
Mr. Lozey,
yeah.
are you ready to talk about the special exception?
Yes, by granting a special exception, it would be 3.8 feet from the 50-foot setback of the town ordinance. I'm in compliance to the RSA 674-17I, I think. Right there, number 2, the lot is very small, and with the shoreline setback makes it difficult, as it is a lot of less than 10,000 square feet from a subdivision done in 1961. Whether they're granting a special exception would adversely impact the neighboring parcels or rural character of the town. By granting this special exception, would not adversely impact the neighboring parcels. There's just a 3.8 back distance that encroaches the building envelope, not impacting the neighbors or the lake or anything like that. Madam Chair.
Do any members of the board have questions regarding?
It was just stated that the subdivision was done in 1961. The documentation said 70s.
Yeah, when I filled it out, I wasn't sure at the time when it was. I just found out it was done in 1961, I think it was.
So that will be in the record that he's corrected the decade, at least.
Very good.
Is that okay?
back to accept to criteria number one, we are voting on two different things, so they both apply.
I don't understand what you're saying, Kevin.
Just the frontage and the special exception.
They will be two separate votes. I mean, they're two different requests. Or someone could make a motion to accept the application as presented, or to deny it as presented. Or we could do it as two different votes. So, if there's no further comment, questions, no members of the public wish to speak. Mr. Lozey, is there anything further you wish to state?
Just saying that it's, I'm a builder, a developer. I know what a wetland is, and I just thought it was a wetland area, but if it's poorly drained because of the shoreline, I just don't know when that occurred, if it was ever there before, but it's there now. In doing my due diligence on the property and checking setbacks and boundary lines and etc. Being that it's not holding water there now, it's been dry, as even with the lake there. I just think that that spot of poorly drained is just from that lower corner of the lot of retaining water at different times of the season. But and because of the setbacks and having the building being a very small envelope and just getting the maximum I can to have a somewhat of a decent home to fit on there, and then trying to stay in compliance with all the other regulations of roof drainage and setbacks from septics and leach fields and roads and building envelopes. It's just really tight, and that's the only hindrance, is that 3.8 feet from what the ordinance is. And we're not encroaching the 50-foot setback from the state. We're beyond that. And our objective is to build a house there, not to disturb the front of the property whatsoever. We might have to have 2 trees removed to get the well in, but other than that, our intention is to keep it to a minimum. I've built many homes on lakes before, and I know what the requirements are. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, sir.
Madam Chair,
Teresa,
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
we're listening.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the case number 20-013-SC-VA from David W. Lozey, requesting the special exception from Article 3, Section B2A of the Nottingham zoning ordinance to permit a new home within 3.8 feet of encroachment to hydric soils where 50 feet is required, and the request for the variance from Article 2, Section C.2.b of the ZO for the 76.8 feet of road frontage where 200 feet is required.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
A motion has been made and seconded to approve case number 20-013-SC-VA as presented, as applied for. All those in favor signify by saying aye, and I will begin. I want you to state your name because I can't see any of you. I vote aye, yes, to the motion.
Yep.
Terry,
Terry Bonzer, I vote aye.
I can't see anybody else. Teresa,
Teresa, I vote aye.
Raylene,
Vote aye.
Kevin,
I have to vote nay as the very minor, and I'll extrapolate on that. I would vote to approve based upon the 200 footage on the first criteria, but I have to vote nay as it is still buildable if the wetland criteria was met. So the wording in the first criteria is just not accurate relative to the special exception.
Actually, Bonnie, can I change my vote?
I don't really know what the proper etiquette on that is, but
Right, I'll let it- I stated that I will let it stand. I-
stand. Other dogs?
Oh, sorry.
I believe she said she was letting her vote stand. Raylene, if that was not the case, please come back on and, okay, then I'm going to say that you said, that's what I heard, that you would let your vote stand, which was an aye.
I agree with you, Bonnie. That's what I heard as well.
Yes, and I know she's in Arizona with her 2 dogs. They're my friends, and one of them is quite yappity when something disturbs her. So the vote was 4 yes to 1 no. So you are approved, Mr. Lozey.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I must remind you that there's a 30-day window in which anyone in the world may object to our decision and cause a delay in your project. So if you are starting to do your project in the next 30 days and someone comes along to object, you might be risking your money.
Yes,
You know, anyone has the right to appeal our decision.
understand.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, members of the board. Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I request just a 3-minute bio break?
You may.
Thank
We're
you.
going to take a 3-minute break. I'm going to set my timer. I'm actually going to make it 4 minutes. If I can find my timer. What I was afraid of if Raylene's dogs kept barking is that mine would start. They're kind of neighbors normally. Hey. Hear that one? That was Miss Zinnia. We also often get coyotes howling here in the evening and the dogs react to them. I can't hear them when the house is shut up, but they can.
Bonnie, can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, well, we're in a motel tonight and people walked by the window, unfortunately, just as we were taking that vote. So my
That is-
apologies to the group.
That is not allowed. Miss Halloween does not allow that.
That's
By
true.
window.
And I need to let you know that I have a meeting at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time.
So you won't be around for the next 2 cases.
Well, it's 8:30, 8:23 now. So I just want to let you know that if the meeting goes beyond 8:50, I will have to withdraw. But Kevin is there and can take my place.
Kevin is there for somebody else. He's already
he is?
represented Peter White.
Oh, that's right. I was
I know-
wondering who Peter was tonight. Okay.
Kevin could be in 2 places at once, maybe, but I don't think it's allowed.
I don't think it's allowed either.
Anyway,
I am
just
not-
signal us if you leave in the middle of the next hearing. Hopefully,
Shh. No, stop. Oh, why can't I not find my off button?
it's called mute, the lower left-hand corner.
I can't find the,
Click on your screen and it'll bring it back. It disappears after a while, but if you put your cursor down near the lower left hand and click, it should show up. Yes? I think it did.
I did it for her.
mute.
Oh, thanks, Joanna. I forgot you had the
No, I was on mute.
it's on mute. Okay, so that was Mr. Lozey. I'm somehow not finding my next case. Is the next case from Mr. Milano?
Yes.
Joanna? Yes, okay. So is everyone back? Are all the board members back? My,
I
Michael.
never left, so I'm here.
we still have a 1-minute window. Is everybody okay for starting, or do you want me to wait another minute?
Can't see me either. Yeah. No, right. I can hear you. Yeah, it's unmuted now.
I'm good.
Bonnie, could everybody be muted unless they're going to be speaking?
Yes. That way we don't hear your dogs barking and your papers rustling. If you mute yourself and then when you speak, you must remember to let yourself click on your mute button again. So I'm going to keep mine on because I have to open up this second case tonight. We have a second public hearing. An application, oh no, that's from Dale. An application for a special exception for adding a second floor to an existing structure. This second floor encroaches on the setbacks by 8 feet on the second floor only. So it looks to me from the pictures like the building is cantilevered out at some point. I don't know if it's all 4 sides. I think you should have plans that look something like this on the first page. In your packet from Joanna, I'm speaking to the board members now. So I somehow don't have that usual, I know you sent me more than one here. I'm talking to myself. That's Mr. Losey.
Would you like me to share it on the screen?
No, I just found it, I think. Case
Okay.
number 20-014-SE-VA variance. Is he looking for a special exception or a variance?
He's looking for both.
Okay, he's got 2 requests then.
Correct.
An application from Louis Milano requesting a special exception from Article 2, Section C 3B of the Nottingham zoning ordinance to permit a second floor to an existing structure 8 feet into the setback where 20 feet is required. And a request for a variance from Article 2, Section C2B of the Nottingham zoning ordinance for 49.96 feet of road frontage where 200 feet is required. The property is located at 37 North River Lake Road in Nottingham and is identified as tax map 1 lot 43. So again, the same rules apply. The applicant will present his or her case. Members of the board may ask questions during the process, may ask questions after the presentation. Members of the public are then invited to speak both for and against. And then the applicant has the final crack at the microphone to either address the objections that were made or make other points. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to you. Mr. Milano, are you presenting your own case?
Yeah.
You are, okay.
Good evening, members of the board, Madam Chairman. So just going through, we're taking this one item at a time, I assume, yes?
Yes, yep.
So as for the road frontage, again, there is a home there and this road frontage hasn't changed in my lifetime. And I've been basically going there since I was a child. It's going to allow for a structure that is currently there to be improved, improving the neighborhood, improving property values, not just this property value, but the surrounding property values. It allows for the surrounding property values will be positively impacted. Placing the home will not impact the public because the footprint of the house has not been altered in any way. The current structure is exactly the same size as the structure that we propose.
So can I interrupt you, sir?
Certainly.
And I apologize for this, but this is one of the other topics that I discussed with Dale Sylvia this morning. Dale is our building inspector. He's the one who denied you.
No deal.
And I believe we discussed that, in my opinion, and even his, you don't really need the road frontage request permission because you have an existing home there already. And so we only require that when there's nothing on the lot. Am I correct, Joanna? Can you speak to that? Yes, I know you helped the applicants with their paperwork. I can't hear you. You're muted. You're talking to the wind. Can't hear you. Say something. Nothing. I don't know how we can have a meeting without Joanna. Try it now.
I don't hear Joanna either.
I don't either.
Can you send her a chat?
She can chat, but it would be much better if she could speak.
I know, but chatter telling her she's muted.
She knows she's muted,
Really?
I believe.
It does not indicate she is muted. We should be.
I just sent her a text to let her know she's not, we can't hear her.
Oh, she's looking at her text right now. She's answering it.
Bonnie,
Is that you?
yeah, it's Teresa. She says it doesn't show her as muted. So she's going to put me as co-host and then sign back in.
Okay, if that works. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We still can't hear her. She was trying to speak. Oh, the limitations of Zoom. Never happened before. You be quiet. You be quiet. Shh. Get on your pillow. Get on your pillow.
It's on the spot.
On your pillow. Get on. You get on your pillow. Sorry, I have to bribe my dogs.
Then they go, you don't have to be muted.
I'm not currently muted.
No, but sometimes you just speak.
Bonnie, your question was whether or not the road frontage applied when there is a building already there. And I think the road frontage would apply if they were going outside the current structure size. And I'm wondering if the reason it was initially put in is because he is stating that the existing, second floor extends back. So I wondered if that was why it was initially put in.
You're probably quite right. However, to me, the footprint isn't changing. So I guess the question is, what's a footprint? The footprint's what's on the ground, isn't it, Kevin?
Yeah, I think the definition of footprint is what's on the ground, although, and I'm a little unclear, I need to ask the applicant this question, but it implies that there's an 8-foot overhang.
No, I think there's a, if you look at the page
Plans.
4, he's given us, you'll see, I think the bottom floor is 20 feet wide, and then that second floor is like 23 feet wide. So that goes out 1.5 foot on each side.
So how does the 8 feet,
I think he's 8 feet, but that other piece of the house must be
5 feet.
9.5 feet from the line or something like that.
so,
Milano,
This is probably 9.5 feet. This is 8 feet.
so the original footprint is,
20 feet wide.
but it's, I guess I just don't glean that yet from the print, but,
Look on page 4 of the print.
okay.
It says 4 on the page. And if you look at the first floor plan, I assume that's the first floor and the second floor. Those little dash lines, I assume, are the second floor.
Yeah, but where is this relative to the lot line? Which,
Well, I don't think it is relative to the lot line, but I think if it's 1.5 feet further out, then the existing structure is probably like 9.5 feet from the lot line, instead of 8 feet. We'll have to clarify that.
yeah, I was gonna say, is that in the package? So if there's already an exception to the 20 feet of possibly
Right,
9.5 feet, and then it's going to 8 feet. I guess that was just my basic question.
right. I went up there and looked at the lot. I mean, it's an old cabin. It's not, doesn't look occupied, but I mean, the lots are tight. Those two lots side by side, they're both tight.
so, Mr. Milano, would you like to present your case, sir? I
Yes,
don't
certainly.
have,
First of all, Terry, Mr. Bonzer? Yeah, Mr.
Yeah.
Bonzer is accurate in his, how we defined it. That was done with myself and Mr. Sylvia. So those numbers are accurate based on the knowledge that we have, based on the certified plan. As for our case, you know, again, I've been in that neighborhood for a long time, and all of the improvements have been vertical because the lots are so tight. The properties are in the only place that they can be. It would be nearly impossible to get an exception to improve these horizontally. So the way to add enough space and to have a living space is to go vertically. In other words, in order for this investment to be a year-round home, which we are hoping it will be for us, the vertical space is required.
so would you like to continue to present your case, including the reasons you should be granted both of these requests?
Certainly, and again, it's redundant because I think the reasons, the positive reasons are redundant. We are improving what is there in the footprint that currently exists. We are going to improve the value of the homes around us in the neighborhood and the lake as a whole. And we're consistent in design with how that lake was designed all those years ago. I've been going to that lake since I was a child in diapers, and those homes have always been built in the manner that we designed this home, frankly. Now, granted, this has a second floor. Not many of them before did. But again, in order for this to be a livable space, you need to have a kitchen, a bedroom, a bathroom, etc. And to do that, you require that extra space. The only place to find it is going to be vertically.
So if you would take up the two requests, include your statements of your reasoning for why the board should find in your favor, like the special,
Especially,
the special exception and the variance separately, like you have the 5 criteria for the variance and you have, what, 3 criteria for the special exception. You just go over those for the board, you expound on them if you need to, expand on them if you need to. And perhaps board members will ask questions.
Certainly. I will tell you that when we wrote these, we were thinking we were going to be looking for 2 variances. So we wrote them as a conjunctively. After we left, some thought process changed, and then one became a special exception and one became a variance. So I only have one set of thought process on it as it is combined. In the spirit of the ordinance is observed because the resulting structure is consistent with the current state and has consistent with the abutters and their abutters. And that's truly true. I've seen these homes expand over the years, and they've all expanded in a similar fashion. Because it allows for derelict property, substantial justice is done because it allows for derelict property to be improved, improving the neighborhood, improving the town, and improving the lake. And the values of the surrounding properties are not diminished, and that's very clear to me that the value of the properties surrounding it and the abutters will be improved based on improving any property that may be tangential to it. And certainly in this case, this is about the most derelict property in that neighborhood. I'm not familiar with the entire lake, but certainly that neighborhood. The increase in property value, of course, increases our neighbors' values. And no fair and substantial relationship exists between the general public purposes of the ordinance provision and the special application of the provision to the property end. Replacing the home would not impact the public because the footprint of the house has not been altered. The number of bedrooms has not been altered, frankly. And certainly the resulting values are going to increase. And that's consistent with all the lakeside properties.
This, I just had a question. This is 2-bedroom?
2-bedroom.
Okay, yeah, because your septic's 2-bedroom. Your tax card says 3, but the septic says 2.
We are this close to being empty nesters.
So you do have a separate document about special exception.
Is that this one right here? No.
Oh, I saw one in here. Wait a minute. Application for a special exception. And then there are 3 criteria that you've addressed. Do you have that, Mr. Milano?
I'm looking. I have the full package.
So it's titled Application for a Special Exception. Now, it looks like it's a different handwriting than.
Is this it?
Variance.
Criteria 1, where the goal set forth. Yeah, I see it. Okay. So by building upward rather than outward, where we are preventing any infringement to the goals noted. Is that what we're discussing?
Yes,
Yes.
that's what I'm talking about. Yep.
Of course, the lot size did not permit adequate ground level expansion. In fact, the lot size doesn't, in the neighborhood, isn't in support of any ground side expansion, which we fully understand that. And improvements to the property will increase the value of the neighborhood. Again, I think there's a lot of cohesion between the reasons to proceed, whether it be for the special exception or the variance. And I understand that they're very different topics, but the goal at the end of the day is to improve the neighborhoods of Nottingham. And I think that this certainly does so.
Do any members of the board have questions of Mr.
Well,
Milano? Or
I just,
comments?
I mean, I went up to look at the law, and I have to agree with Mr. Milano on improving the neighborhood if they do something with it. So.
Madam Chair, Kevin here. I have a question.
Go ahead, Kevin.
As minor as it might be, I'm looking at the certified plot plan that's in our package. And it appears that the proposed 20 by 46 house footprint, on one side it says 2.23 feet from the boundary line, 9.27. And on the other side, I see an 8.21. Looks like it's crossed out and initialed.
Yeah, let me explain that.
If that's and it looks like it might be stairways to the second floor or what have you. Is that the 8 foot that is in the application modified from 8.21?
Yeah, may I, Kevin? May I answer?
You may.
Our architect put those there. What they are is a set of stairs supposedly for the deck. We never asked for them to be there, and they're not going to be there. They're going to be inset in the front of the deck. Again, it just never occurred to me, but Mr. Sylvia brought it up to me. I said, no, they're not going there. That's why they're crossed out in initial. That was what Mr. Sylvia said for me to do. They, I assure you, are not going there. They're not even a reasonable spot to put stairs.
Understood. It is crossed out and initialed. So where is the 8-foot, let me see. It's an 8-foot into the setback, so there's a 12-foot number. And where would that be on this plot plan? Unless I'm misconstruing.
I see the 8.21, and frankly, I think that may have been to the stairs. I'm not entirely certain, which I suppose you'd have to add 4 to that now and get 12.21. Typical set of stairs is going to be about 52 inches wide.
Yep. Okay, so just for the record, we're expecting off of the I'll say the pictorially, it's the north side. Is it actually north? It's on the top side of the plot plan, would be the 12-foot setback. That is relative to the 8-foot encroachment that's identified.
I asked Joanna to put that plot plan up because I don't find a copy of it in my.
Yeah, I don't see it either.
Me either.
You have a copy, Joanna? Can you hear me? Are you still running the show, Teresa, or is Joanna?
No, I'm not running any show.
I'm hosting. Can you put that plot plan up, Joanna? Do you have it? Still can't hear her. I know, I'm sorry.
On a piece of paper, Bonnie, and hold it up.
You can do it. I don't have a piece of paper. That's why I want to see it. You don't have it either, right?
I don't have it, no. I don't know what Kevin's talking about. I've looked through all my paperwork.
I know, me either.
I have the maps, but I don't know what page or Peter that Kevin was talking about.
It's dated 10/19/2020. New Hampshire Land Consultants.
Who consultants?
Hampshire Land.
Plot plan.
Well, there is
Oh,
another.
there. Okay, Joey got it up.
I don't have that,
No, I don't have that either.
or at least I can't find that. Wait a minute.
There it is. Yeah, no, I didn't have that.
I did find it. It was on the Nottingham website.
Oh, did you put that up here? No. So now what was your question, Kevin, now that we can see it?
I was just trying to clarify that on the top part of the house to the top boundary line is approximately 12 feet. And that's what's being asked for in the request. It's just not stated in this plot plan, but you can glean that, as Mr. Milano stated, without the stairs, it is dimensioned at 8.21, and removal of the stairs will make it just about 12 feet.
Removal of the stairs makes what, 12 feet?
And if the stairs aren't there and the footprint of the house hasn't changed, I'm wondering why a variance is needed.
Well, isn't it 20? I mean, it's 20 feet. He has an existing structure, but he's going out a foot and a half, so,
On the second floor,
on the second floor.
which doesn't show, this is just the footprint of the first floor, I believe. Is that correct, Mr. Milano?
That is accurate.
So,
As minor as it is, if the overhang is part of the 20 feet, it may just want to be clarified, that's all.
I'm sorry, if you're waiting for an answer from me, I need a more specific question. I'm sorry.
No, I guess I'll direct this to Madam Chair. From my perspective, it can be, documented in the records that the distance from the top boundary line to the, I'm going to say, it's either footprint or overhang, is 12 feet. And I don't know the answer to that.
You're saying he doesn't need the variance or the special exception?
I don't have an answer whether the overhang is part of the
Footprint.
20 feet or not.
I believe it is encroaching on the 20 feet. That's the reason that Dale Sylvia sent him here. And Dale and I had a discussion as to, is the encroachment from a cantilevered second floor, or is it just the footprint? So in his opinion, obviously it's the cantilevered second floor, because the original building doesn't need any approval from us.
So is the 8 feet accurate? Or rather, 12 feet from the line, is that accurate? If there's approximately 1.5 feet of overhang. As minor as this is, just want to state for the record.
Well, I don't think I'm qualified to answer that question. Mr. Milano, can you answer that?
I've got my calculator out. I think you're going to be at 10.96. That's from the cantilever.
We need 20.
Yeah, you're not getting 20.
I mean, does the ordinance say 20 is my, what are you getting a special exception setback? Yeah, 20 feet is required.
Right. I have one question on the, the lot is in the dark outline of that lot is the lot line. On that left-hand side of the lower side of the house, it says 2.23 feet from the line. Is that correct? I mean, 2.23.
Accurate to my knowledge.
That's the first floor, right?
Correct.
So then if you put the cantilever part over, you're like, 0.73 or something like that to the line. Is that right? Because you're asking for an 8-foot variance. That would be all right from the back line, maybe. The back one.
Again, I think your numbers are accurate. If that.
Just to be clear, Mr. Milano, the 20 by 46 is the footprint on the ground. Is that correct?
That is the current footprint, and that is the intended footprint.
Understood. So for the record, should we get it documented in print, or is verbal dimensions acceptable? And I'll leave that up to Madam Chair.
You're talking about verbal dimensions of the footprint as shown on this map, Kevin?
Yeah, for instance, the 2.23 may be less by the amount of the overhang. And whether that gets documented on paper for record or.
Well, if this is a cantilever go all around the house, Mr. Milano?
It runs down the 46-foot side, left and right.
Okay, so the long sides of the house. or cantilever out? 1.5 feet on each side?
That's accurate.
So if it's 1.5 feet, that leaves less than a foot on that side.
It leaves 0.73, yeah, 3/4 of a 9 inches.
So now is this documented now in the minutes? Yes. Kevin, are you satisfied with that?
I am,
Okay.
as well as the rest of the board is, yes.
Do any other board members have questions, comments? There being none, I'm going to ask if there any members of the public wish to address this application. I'm going to ask first for anyone who wants to speak in support of it. Is there anyone present? I don't see anybody. Is there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition?
Not opposition, but I'd love to speak.
Who are you? I can't.
My name's Larry Elliott. I'm the son of the neighbor, Lawrence Sherman Elliott, at 35 North River Lake Road, and the executor of his estate. He asked me to come here today and just listen to what was going on. He fully supports them renovating the house and making it livable and having neighbors there. So I just wanted to say that just here in support of making that and beautifying our neighborhood. So thank you very much, Lou.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Say hello
Elliott.
to Dad.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd like to speak.
Who's speaking?
Richard Molan.
Could you get Richard up on this screen here? Because I can't see him.
I'll get myself up, I think. I don't know how to work this thing.
See the lower left, it says audio.
Okay, I got it.
Put yourself on audio and it'll show you. There you go. You're not exactly.
All right, yeah, no, I'm 100% support of this for Louis. And I just want to say it looks good. And I'm not much of a talker, but I want to let him know that we support him 100%.
Thank you, but Richard. Please state your address so we know where you live.
39 North River Lake Road. We live right
neighborhood.
Right next door.
You're in right next door.
Okay. We're the other side. Sherm lives on one side and we live on the other.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. Good luck.
Anyone else in the audience here who wishes to speak? Do any members of the board have further questions? If not, I'm going to close the public hearing and see if any members of the board wish to deliberate out loud on this application. No one?
That one question was, it says 8 feet for the setback, which is what, 12 feet? But I mean, that one corner is only like going to be 9 inches away from the line, right?
So you're suggesting he's not asking for enough?
Yeah, wouldn't you need one for the 9 inches from the line?
Joanna? So this application or this proposed project has been reviewed by the building inspector. It seems like he didn't quite pick up on that aspect of it. That the overhang is on both sides of the building and that the building is closer than 8 feet on that, I don't know, I wouldn't call it the back side, but that sideline side.
Can you hear me now?
I can. Woo, welcome back.
I just had to wait for a while, huh?
Roger.
I recommend that you all consider maybe
That
putting
video.
it in your approval as in words of approval.
If somebody makes a motion to approve that they include that smaller or that larger encroachment in the back on the other side of the building.
Correct.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
If that's acceptable to members of the board. So I guess at this point, if no one has anything further to add to this hearing, I'm going to ask for a motion.
Madam Chair, Kevin Bassity, I'll make a motion to accept case 20-14-SE-VA application from Louis Milano, requesting a special exception from Article 2, Section C3B of the Nottingham zoning ordinance to permit a second floor to an existing structure, stated 8 feet, to be revised to a 9 inches from the south side property line where 20 feet is required.
And then can you do the other one?
And I just
8.
want to be clear, and maybe that 9 inches, maybe that should be 6 inches, just for margin of drip edges and such, gutters, what have you, and to amend and I believe the number was 10.96, close to 11. Maybe we should say 10 feet setback on the north side of the boundary line where 20 feet is required. And a request for variance from Article 2, Section 2C2B of the Nottingham zoning ordinance for 49.96 feet of road frontage where 200 feet is required. Property is located at 37 North River Lake Road in Nottingham, New Hampshire, and is identified in tax map 1, lot 43.
I'll second it.
Okay, a motion has been made and seconded to approve the application from Louis Milano, case 20-014-SE-VA, as amended by the board. All those in favor? We'll say aye individually. We're going to do roll call because we're Zooming, and I will vote yes. Kevin?
Approved.
Aye.
Raylene said aye. Did you say aye, Teresa?
I didn't, but I will.
Okay, sorry, I thought I heard you.
No, you didn't.
Okay, so a yes from Teresa and Terry.
Yes, I say aye.
Okay, so that's 5-0 in favor of your application. Mr. Milano, you have been approved.
Thank you.
I'm required
Thank you,
to,
entire board.
anyone may appeal this decision, so they have 30 days to do so. So if you start your project before the 30 days are up, it's on your pocketbook. If someone
Understood.
should come along. It doesn't happen very often. In fact, hardly ever, but it can happen. Thank you. Be aware. Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay, so we have one remaining case. Mr. Barry, I'm sorry you've had to wait through 2 hours of the zoning board meeting to get to your case.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I think it's important to note, and it will be noted in the minutes, that we are down to 4 board members.
thank you. Raylene left.
Yes.
I didn't hear her say that she was going to leave. I guess she stayed to the end. Good. Good. So that means, Mr. Barry, that you have the right to postpone this meeting till next month. And in the hopes of having a full board, because we do not have a full board. And obviously you need a minimum of 3 votes to prevail. And the odds are better of getting 3 out of 5 than getting 3 out of 4. So that decision is now yours. If you wish to proceed, we will proceed. If you wish to postpone, we will continue the case.
Well, Madam Chair, based on some of the opening conversation that we had concerning your comments about the necessity of variance and Mr. Bassett's comments about review of the package, I'm wondering, is there a potential for us to move through the presentation so we understand what we're talking about? And if there's additional information needed, that we'd be able to provide that information and therefore continue the vote to a different night? Or do I need to decide whether or not I want 5 members present currently?
So they're almost two different questions. I think that you just have to decide before the vote. I don't think you have to decide right now. Is that correct, Joanna?
Mhm.
Yeah, so
Yes, it is.
you can wait and we can do the presentation and then you can decide. And I expect from my conversation with the building inspector and the nature of this case and the fact that probably only Kevin has any expertise at all. I'm not sure he does anything with wetlands, but I know he's an engineer, is that we probably will need some guidance and possible education before we vote. At least that will probably be my recommendation to the board. Unless, of course, you somehow convince us that you can educate us and do everything. And we know you represent your client. And we probably will continue it. We possibly will continue it for that reason. That most of the members of the board, we've not had a case of this nature come before us. And recently has the ordinance been interpreted to require an applicant to come before us? Because I believe the state oversees this kind of a request anyway. Which is not to say that a zoning ordinance can't be more restrictive than the state rules. It can be, but I know that speaking for myself, I'm not probably feeling really well qualified to talk about your case with any authority tonight. You know, I think that I want some advice from what I know. But anyway, we'll be happy to listen to your case and then we'll see how it resolves. I may be completely wrong. I'm only one member of the board and everybody here does their own thought process. So if you'd like to continue, I will now read your application request.
Bonnie, before you move forward and before he says anything else, this is Teresa. I looked up dredging and filling on the internet because I'm not familiar at all with it either. And it is an NHDES jurisdiction, so I don't know why there's no mention of that in this. And I would prefer to have a little more education as to what this is all going to be entailing on this, because this is in my opinion, 6,717 square feet is a good amount of area, and I'd like to know what is going to be happening with it and how that impacts the area. So I'm not comfortable voting on anything tonight without having more information to go on.
Yeah, I expect you're not the only board member who feels that way. I know that I do, and I think that Kevin has said enough to make me think he's at least hasn't investigated it enough. And Terry does a lot of work in soils, but I don't think he's.
There is a lot. I mean, you look at the package, there is a lot to absorb. But it is one we've never had before us. So I always thought it would go to DES. And
I think it always used to.
Yeah.
And I think the current building inspector is of the opinion that the town should rewrite that article in the zoning ordinance. But that as it stands right now, in his opinion, the people have to come before this board.
Until it's in the public notice mode.
Say that again, Joanna?
Until it is in the public notice mode. So once it's noticed that we are attempting to change it and it will go on to the ballot, it will remain as that Mr. Berry and any other cases like Mr. Berry's will be coming to you.
that will be in what, December or January or what?
Thereabouts. Yeah, about January.
But isn't it an NHDES jurisdiction anyway?
Except the zoning ordinance says otherwise, and zoning ordinances can be
More
stricter
strict,
than the state.
right? They can be. So it's
So
Why it was determined.
so then we can say, just saying, and I'm not saying that this is my leaning, please. But if we said no, then he wouldn't have any ability to go to DES. But if we say yes, then they have to go to DES anyway.
Go ahead,
Is that
Mr. Berry.
So, Madam Chair, again, this is Christopher Berry, and I'm with Berry Surveying and Engineering representing the applicant. So if you might, I'm just going to give a little intro as to why we're here tonight. If that might help the conversation along just a little bit.
Let me jump in and just read the case, which we always do before every case so that it's in the minutes, exactly what we're discussing, okay? So this is, the next hearing is case number 20-014-VA. Application from Robert DeBerto requesting a variance from Article 3, Section B4 of the Nottingham zoning ordinance to permit filling 6,717 square feet of a PF01/4EG wetland as part of the road construction for a proposed subdivision. The property is located on Mitchell Road in Nottingham, New Hampshire, and is identified as tax map 7, lot 1, sublot N. Thank you. You may have the floor now, Mr. Berry.
So this is sort of a precursor to the rest of my presentation. I just want to simply explain to the board why we're here tonight, how we got here tonight, and then if the board wants me to move forward with my full presentation, I'd be happy to. So I think we all understand that in the state of New Hampshire and all across the country, we have areas called jurisdictional wetlands. They're called jurisdictional wetlands because the Army Corps of Engineers regulates what can and cannot be done inside of those wetland areas. The Army Corps then delegates the responsibilities of being a good shepherd to those wetlands to the individual states. So the board is correct in thinking that if you need a wetland permit, if you have to cross a wetland or fill a wetland for whatever reason, that is a state action that you need to apply for. There are varying levels of permits. I won't go into all the details of them, but basically the larger the impact, the more severe your permit application is. In most cases, that application, once it's been ruled on by New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, is then sent to Army Corps of Engineers under what's known as the Programmatic General Permit, the PGP. And the Army Corps of Engineers then reviews the package and sends you a final notice of either approval or denial. So in in every other town that I work in, which there's many in the state of New Hampshire, we would, in a project like this, we would simply apply for a wetland permit and submit that to New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, normally after review by a local conservation commission. In this case, that's precisely what we've done. And in fact, we've already gone to the Conservation Commission. We've submitted our package to DES, the Wetlands Bureau, and we've actually received a comment letter back, which we have then addressed and resubmitted to them. At one of our prior planning board meetings, it was brought up, I believe, by the assistant chair that the specific language in B4 specifically prohibits dredging and filling in the wetland area from the ordinance. And it was his opinion and a few of the other board members' opinion that because that language was so specific and it didn't give guidance as to how the planning board could take action in that instance, that a ruling by the Zoning Board of Adjustments was required, a variance. That discussion was then sent to legal counsel to the planning board. I assume it's the same legal counsel to this board also. And the message that we received back was that legal counsel felt that because the language was written in such a certain way that a variance was technically required to dredge and fill for this project in the jurisdictional wetland area for the project to move ahead in the planning process. Now, I argued that this has really never been done before in the town of Nottingham. It has, I think, a pretty severe impact on the residents of the town of Nottingham. It's not done in any of the surrounding towns around you. But at the end of the day, the planning board feels that their guidance from their attorneys is proper. And so we're here before you asking for a variance for us to dredge infill in a wetland. If this board were to rule on the application, the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services would still have to issue a permit. You're not circumventing anybody else's review. This is simply another layer of review that I feel is then imposed in the town of Nottingham on applicants as part of the planning process. So that's sort of the background as to why we're standing before you tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Berry. Are there any comments or questions from members of the board after hearing Mr. Berry's initial testimony?
Can you comment on your, I'm not quite sure the right words, your pre-application and the comments that were let? Is there any pre-approval status or at this time? Or I'm not quite sure the right question, but.
Are you referring to the Department of Environmental Services review?
Yes, sir.
Yes, so DES wrote back, they published what's known as a request for more information, RFMI. There were a couple of questions. I don't have it right at my fingertips. They had a question about least impacting alternatives, which I actually discussed in my ZBA application to you. And they requested us to modify our design slightly to remove some of the impact within the wetland areas. Minor amounts, we're talking 100 square feet or less. They also asked us to include what we would consider temporary impacts within the wetland areas. And so this would be impacts incidental to construction and not permanent. And so we've done that also and resubmitted that back to the department. There was a discussion about working with the Natural Heritage Bureau to ensure that they have a proper sign off in the application process, which they will and most certainly do. So the request for more information was not strenuous in any way and led us to believe that this was a permittable project.
Okay, thank you. Do I read the prints correctly? And just say if I'm jumping ahead, but essentially there are two culverts that would be part of the filling area.
Yes. I can go into great detail about those, but for now, I would say yes. Both of these crossings are simple crossings. They're not filling for land development. And there are proper culverts and or box culverts that are proposed to ensure that there's good hydraulic connection from one side of the wetland to the other.
Okay. Can you just briefly describe the 6,000, you got the wording right, 6.7 square feet of filling? What would that be a part of? Is that for what purpose is that filling for? And I assume part of it is around the culvert area, but is there more than just around the culvert area?
The filling is, again, it's for the pure process of crossing. And so when you cross over a wetland and ensure that you have proper clearance for the culvert to be sized, side slopes, grading, things of that nature, all of this fill is associated with roadway design and impact. There's no other impact proposed other than the actual crossing itself. So the material that would be placed would be granular, fill material, and then road grade material. The side slopes would be loamed and seeded with a conservation mix. The proper head walls would be installed on the culverts or the box culvert. In some cases, we're proposing steeper slopes to ensure the least amount of impact possible. And so those slopes require some guardrail. So that would be installed in those areas. So that's the general footprint of the impact.
Okay, so just to say that, in my words, the bulk of the filling is for the road.
Yes, yes. I'm sorry, I wasn't sure how detailed you wanted me to be. Yes.
No, that's good. Thank you.
Did you have a question, Terry?
No.
So, Mr. Barry, could you also tell us about your conference with the Nottingham Conservation Commission?
Absolutely. So we try and make a trip on projects of this size to the Conservation Commission, either mostly during the planning process, the planning board process. And so at that meeting, we described all of the best management practices that are to be used on site. And so when we're dealing with wetlands, we're oftentimes dealing with plants and animals that need a lot of consideration. And we're dealing with stormwater impacts that also need a lot of consideration. And so my presentation to that board revolved around the stormwater design of the site. We're using what's known as a gravel wetland to capture stormwater and treat it fully using the UNH Stormwater Center's manual, as well as the alteration of terrains project path and project manual. And so we discussed that topic of stormwater. We are fully treating the stormwater that comes off from our site from using these systems. It treats nitrogen, phosphorus, and hydrocarbons. We discussed the detention and attenuation that takes place inside of the detention ponds and the gravel wetland areas. And then we discussed really fine-tuned details, such as on this project site, we're proposing only natural roadside matting. We have an issue on other construction sites, or have had issues on other construction sites, where plastic netting was used. And the wildlife, it's just not wildlife friendly. And so we're using a natural product on this project site. The sumps that are in the outlet structures are to be filled with a crushed stone, so that any animal that might become entrapped inside them has an easy escape route out, and they're not trapped permanently. We discussed how the culverts are buried. So they're oversized culvert devices that are buried. And the reason for that is to create a natural bottom so that, again, animals, amphibians mostly, can travel back and forth up and down the culvert in a natural format.
From one side of the wetland to the other?
That's right. So that there's clear passage there. Ensuring that we're not using the wetland as an attenuation factor or a detention value. So oftentimes people will choke down culverts to try and store water in wetlands. That's not a proper way of dealing with stormwater in today's age. So a lot of those types of discussions took place. The last part of the discussion was ensuring that the 50-foot buffer that Nottingham has, or the building setback to wetlands, be maintained as a buffer where it's shown on the single-family residential lots, and that buffer be documented on the final plan, that it be documented in the proposed deeds for the parcel or parcels, and that it be posted with placards along the 50-foot buffer to ensure that the future homeowners understand that there's a 50-foot buffer there and it should not be disturbed. That was important to ensure that there's a riparian buffer around the wetlands on the entire site, and that it be maintained permanently. There was one final discussion about pavement type to try and promote using a more rough pavement style, so that if an amphibian does get onto the pavement, that they can get off the pavement in a proper format. Smooth materials are very hard for them to move around on. And so by modifying the stone size and gradation in the top coat, I think we're able to to pacify, I think it was Sue's concern on that, and ensure that if something does become trapped on the pavement, that they can get off. The last real topic for a low impact development design on the site is using sloped granite curb instead of vertical granite curb, and that allows for animals to climb the curbing. Oftentimes in vertical granite curb situations, if animals enter onto a roadway, they can't get off because there's a 6-inch wall is a big wall to a small animal. So those types of low impact design were quite thoroughly discussed at the Conservation Commission. And at the end of that meeting, they recommended approval of the project and approval to submit to DES.
Thank you. Sounds like a pretty good, like they pretty much approved, or that they negotiated with you the proper way to make these improvements, which are not necessarily improvements to the wildlife.
That's correct. So much so that Sue, I think at the last planning board meeting, argued against us coming to the zoning board. I think she felt that the planning board had that process under control, but here we are.
But here you are.
Okay. Another question for you. You mentioned the 50-foot setback. Is that something that goes into the individual lots deeds so that, in the future, a 20-foot setback variance is not possible? I'm just curious.
In this case, what we're offering is that be noticed as a restriction in the deed so that future landowners understand the restriction on their parcel. So yes, that would be a restriction in each individual deed, as well as quite clearly noted on the recording plan.
Okay. Madam Chair, I don't have our zoning ordinance in front of me, and the special wording or unique wording at the appropriate time. Could we review that?
A reading of the ordinance that's making him come here, you mean, or the article?
Yeah, that made the planning board feel that we need to review it. It was mentioned that this.
The building inspector, not the planning board. She just said that, well, Sue Mooney argued against them having to come here. I'm not sure that was a decision of the whole board. Joanna might know. But no, you want to hear what article in the zoning ordinance made the building inspector send them to us, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
the building inspector did not send them to you. The planning board did.
Okay, thank you. The planning board sent them to us. So could you find the article that is there and read it out into the record here tonight so we can all hear it? Because we don't have our little notebooks.
You're talking about the permitted uses for the wetland conservation areas. I happen to have my zoning ordinance with me. I keep it home.
I'm talking about Article 3, Section B4 of the zoning
Yes,
ordinance.
it talks about permitted uses in wetland conservation areas. Permitted uses that do not result in the erection of any structure or alter the surface configuration of the land by the addition of fill or by dredging, such as forestry, tree farming, agriculture, including grazing, farming, truck gardening, harvesting crops, but not including the stockpiling of manure, construction of well water supplies, wildlife habitat development and management, parks and recreation uses that are consistent with the purpose and expressed intentions of this ordinance, conservation areas and nature trails, and open space in accordance with subdivision regulations and other sections of this ordinance. That's what 3B4 says.
Thank you. Are you good with that, Kevin?
So just in my own surmise of that reading, because this is residential, and I'm just guessing, but that is why the planning board sent it to the ZBA.
That would be my understanding because it does not fit in those things that are listed as permitted uses. And for your information, it's on page 13 of the ZO.
Thank you, Teresa.
Madam Chair, if I might just glean a little more insight, the planning boards, they were really, they keyed in on the words any structure or alter of the surface configuration of the land. So in their mind, if you put a shovel in it, you've altered it, and therefore that is not a permitted use.
And so the permitted use is the use that you need permission for, let me rephrase that, is this little area that's been colored pink on our map. Is that correct?
There are 2 areas that are colored pink, yes.
Oh, yeah, okay, I see one on this second off. So those areas. So it's not one area that's 6,000 something square feet, it's the combination of the both of them, correct?
That's correct.
It's not one 6,700 square foot area. It's the combination. Are they approximately of equal size? Do you know, Mr. Berry?
They're approximate. One's about 3,000 and the other's about 3,700.
Okay. So do we wish to let him proceed? Or does anyone have any further comment? Then I'm going to have the applicant continue with his presentation.
Johanna, would it be okay if I shared my screen?
Sure.
So I think as we've come to realize, the project is a subdivision. It happens to be located on Mitchell Road. And the project started with a design review with the planning board last fall and has progressed to a full design. At that design review, we presented 2 plans. We presented a conventional subdivision layout, which is before you tonight. And we've presented an open space design, which had 2 longer cul-de-sacs on each side of the wetland. There's a provision in the subdivision regulations that requests that applicants review projects for connectivity and not create cul-de-sacs when possible. And in fact, you need to ask for a specific waiver to allow for cul-de-sacs. In that instance, we were informed at the design review meeting that the connectivity, the looping road, was preferred. And so we went to work on the engineering design of the looping road. All projects start with a full boundary and topographic survey of the site. And that includes hiring John Hayes, who's a wetlands scientist, as well as a soil scientist, to review and map all of the wetlands on site. And so on this colored rendering, you can see there's a wetland that starts on Mitchell Road, and it comes down through the site here in the center, and then opens up into a large, pretty vast wetland, and then goes off to the, I think that's the southeast, off the site, and then further on down, even further to the southeast. There's also a wetland that connects onto that, and it comes from an abutting road known as Sutton Drive, and that comes down through the site and connects onto that large wetland that comes into the center of the property. And so you can see we have upland area on this side of the wetlands, and then we have an island of upland area here, and then we have another island of upland out at the back of the site. And so when we look at laying out roadways and subdivisions, the term called minimization and avoidance is really important when reviewing those right from the onset of most projects. The Department of Environmental Services requires that you minimize and avoid wetlands to the extent practical, while still providing for access to productive uplands. And so in this case, we have 3 areas of productive uplands that we would like to access. So the first key step in minimization and avoidance is finding the more narrow areas of the wetlands to cross. And so I think looking at the plan, you would agree that these areas are the most narrow. The second key factor in minimization and avoidance is crossing at the most perpendicular angle possible. If you can imagine running a road alongside a wetland or parallel to it in some way through it, the side slopes of the proposed roadway would extend much further into the wetlands and create a much larger impact. And so you can see here, we're proposing very perpendicular crossings. Another area of minimization is to ensure, again, we talked about the wildlife transport. And so we've done a complete and total hydraulic analysis of the site that's been submitted to CMA engineers for review with minimal comment in the back. It's also been submitted to the alteration of terrain for review, and they also have minimal comment on our hydraulic analysis. The purpose of the hydraulic analysis is to ensure that the proper best management practices, the detention ponds and the gravel wetlands and things of that nature are installed to ensure that downstream flows are maintained, downstream volume is maintained, and that nutrient loads are not increased to pollute downstream stormwater. The other function of the hydraulic analysis is to ensure that the connectivity hydraulically from one side of the proposed crossing to the other is connected and works properly during the large storm events, the 50 and 100-year storm events. And so in this case, call this area in the center crossing 1, and I refer to that in my narrative to you. This is crossing 1. In this case, there is a substantial amount of flow, and it is adjacent to higher functions and values wetlands. And so we've proposed a box culvert in this area. It is a 3-foot tall by 4-foot wide box culvert. It's concrete, and it's proposed to be buried 1 foot. And that is for the purpose of creating what's known as a natural bottom in the culvert. And by having such a large opening for flow to enter and exit and having a natural bottom, you're essentially able to recreate the natural systems that take place there and the natural functions and values of the crossings in that area. Moving on to impact area 2, we've done a very similar thing where that does not require a large box culvert, but would only require approximately a 24-inch culvert. We're proposing a larger 36-inch culvert, and we're proposing that that be buried 1/2 foot to again try and simulate that natural bottom culvert. In both crossings, we minimize and avoid by going with steeper side slopes or embankments. And so instead of going with a 3-to-1 flatter or a 4-to-1 flatter slope, we steepen that side slope up to ensure that our bottom impact within the wetland area is minimized to the extent practical. And so we're proposing 2-to-1 side slopes. Guardrail would be required at the top of those slopes, and those slopes would be protected with engineered matting during construction and then vegetation post-construction. Lastly, the proposed culverts have head walls that are proposed on them, and the head walls stop the fill from entering the wetlands at the actual entrance and exit to the wetland areas at the crossing itself. And those are important in minimizing and avoiding the wetlands. One key feature to consider when looking at functions and values of wetlands on site, we place values on the different wetlands and wetland systems. And so wetlands that are more standard, and you'll note in our application, we call out the wetlands that we're modifying or filling as PF01Es. These are very common wetlands in the state of New Hampshire. Essentially, it's palustrian forested wetlands, and I think we could all agree that Nottingham has ample forested wetlands. That's important because there are other areas on site where there are large amounts of very poorly drained soils, shrub style wetlands that have much higher functions and values associated with them. And those are the areas that we would essentially avoid as part of a project path. In my application to the board, we prepared had Jack prepare a functions and values analysis for the wetland permit. And I thought that leading to many of the 5 criteria within the variance analysis, the functions and values analysis is important for us and the board to consider when considering whether or not this has been designed in the most practical format possible. And so that's why that was submitted to you also. The remainder of the project is not necessarily germane to the zoning board. That's more of a planning board issue, but we are here specifically for the disturbance and quote impact inside the wetlands areas themselves. So I guess with that, I'd be happy to try and answer any questions that you might have, and then at the appropriate time, I can work through the projected 5 criteria if you think that's appropriate for tonight's meeting.
Do any members of the board have questions of Mr. Berry?
Yes, Kevin here, I have a question. Why is the impact area number 1 necessary? And just, I'm curious, for instance, why could you have put a cul-de-sac, I'll say, on each side, and if that's the right thing to do there, and not have a crossing? Was that option considered?
Yes, sir, that option was considered as part of the design review process. We had a layout that did not cross the wetland in that area, but as part of a larger planning thought and theory, having a connected road is far superior to having 2 disconnected roads. And that has to do with eventual town maintenance of the roadways, as well as safety concerns coming in and out of a project. These cul-de-sacs wouldn't be exceptionally long by any means. In fact, Sutton Drive would probably be as long as either one of those as you described. But the maintenance, specifically winter maintenance of maintaining 2 cul-de-sacs in that fashion would place a pretty good burden on the town and the future use of the roadway, where you enter, you have to go in and plow around a cul-de-sac and then back out again, and then you'd have to do the same thing on the other side. And the general planning theory is that where a connection can be made, it should be. And that's supported in the planning board's subdivision regulations as well.
Is the 1 cul-de-sac shown the only one?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I guess I'm a little, I'd say mystified may not be the right word, but it seems like a crossing is more detrimental than a plow going around a circle and maintenance, but that's only an opinion.
Do other members of the board have questions?
Another additional question. On either side of the impact area number 1, it says, a little hard to see, but detention pond on the left, large square, and other light blue areas on both sides of that crossing. Is that just for water overflow kind of thing? What are those blue?
So the way the geometry of the road is designed, the stormwater from Mr. Bassett, can you see my cursor on the screen?
Yes, on the road on the left.
Yep. So the stormwater comes from this area down the roadway and enters the detention cell where it's held back and detained. It's essentially stored for metering purposes. and then is metered into this cell here, and this is the treatment cell. So this is the gravel wetland that I was referring to earlier. There are 2 cells in a gravel wetland, so water enters the first cell and is treated for nitrogen, and then enters the second cell and is also treated for nitrogen. And that design theory is held the same on the opposite side of the wetland crossing, where stormwater comes down the slope in this fashion, enters the detention pond, and is then metered into the gravel wetland on the other side. Water that enters the roadway in the middle is actually split in both directions. So none of the stormwater coming from the impervious surface is directed to the wetlands directly. They are all directed to treatment cells prior to discharge.
Understood. Thank you.
Can I ask you about the treatment cells? Like, is that something that requires maintenance, or how does a treatment cell work?
So in this case, the gravel wetlands oddly function just like a standard wetland. The gravel wetland is the least amount of maintenance of all of the best management practices that we utilize. It acts much similar to a detention cell than, say, a rain garden does, where there's many plants and things like that that need maintenance. In this case, in a gravel wetland, water enters the pond, and then it enters what's known as a subsurface area. So it's actually a lot of the pond, the treatment takes place below grade. I'll spare you a lot of the science, but nitrogen cannot be removed from water unless it is put into an anaerobic state. So a situation where it's always underwater. And these gravel wetlands create this anaerobic state so that the nitrogen can be removed from the storm flow. And that's the same with phosphorus. Phosphorus cannot be removed without that process as well. The reason that that's important for this site is we're at the headwaters of what's known as a Class A water body, and we are required to treat nitrogen and phosphorus as part of our design.
Mm-hmm. And so the nitrogen and phosphorus that are removed via this process just stay in those second ponds forever, or what?
It's the nitrogen is actually turned to gas, NO2 gas.
It evaporates, it dissipates.
It's off gassed. That's right.
Yeah. And what about the other one?
Phosphorus.
Yeah.
I can't speak to phosphorus. I don't understand phosphorus quite the same way I do nitrogen. I don't believe it stays in the cell. I believe that there's a biomechanical process that takes place there also.
Okay, thank you. And are there other questions? Okay, so I think it's now time for you to go over the criteria that you wish the board to consider that supports your request, that you hope supports your request.
And Madam Chair, at the appropriate time, you could ask the applicant if he still wants to continue.
I will, and that will come after, like I still have not opened the microphone to anyone from the public who might wish to speak, and that will come after he's finished his initial presentation, which I would assume this would probably be the last piece of it. Are you good with that, Mr. Berry?
I'm fine as long as I have an opportunity to postpone if deemed necessary, yes.
You do have you will have an opportunity to postpone because we don't have a full board, and it will be before we take a vote on anything. I think you're allowed to postpone right up to the point of voting. Am I correct, Joanna? Yeah, so you might as well finish your process. It might bring more information to light for the board members to consider.
I'll paraphrase where I can. The board has our written variance criteria in writing. The first criteria is a variance would not be contrary to public interest. I think that I've demonstrated that the public interest in areas we're talking about wetlands, the public interest is ensuring that treatment is taking place, that the natural systems that the wetland system would ordinarily undergo or take as part of treatment and attenuation of stormwater. That is all being replicated through engineering design. I think I've demonstrated to the board that keeping the public interest in mind when designing stormwater systems on site has been really at the forefront of the entire project design from day one, and that the public interest in ensuring that the natural features such as the animals as well as plant life in the area has been maintained through the engineered project design, and it is the least impact to the site. The spirit of the ordinance is to protect wetlands to the extent practical, not only to protect wetlands in a blanket sense, but ensure that protection of higher value and function wetlands takes place, and that consideration for lower functions and values of wetlands is considered when proposing crossings and proposing development on sites in general. The spirit of the ordinance as it relates to buffers and buffering is certainly taking place with the discussion of deeded restrictions, signposts, and other warning factors on site for future owners in consideration of that riparian buffer through the site. I think all is an observation of the spirit of the ordinance. Substantial justice is done. This test, the litmus test here, is that any gain from the applicant outweighs the detriment to surrounding areas. I think we've demonstrated quite clearly that the gain to the applicant is to gain access to productive uplands. We're not talking about small little islands of uplands that are barely buildable. These are high production, large areas of productive uplands. And the loss of the wetland in this case is far overcome and exceeded by the engineered practices, the now common engineered practices in the state of New Hampshire. So the loss of attenuation in the wetlands is well outweighed by the attenuation values in the detention systems and treatment cells, and the crossings and natural bottom features that the wetlands currently have are maintained to the extent practical through the engineered natural bottom systems that we're proposing. Values of the surrounding property values are not diminished. In this case, diminution would be a flooding event that was caused by an improper filling of a wetlands or a pollutant load downstream of the project that would be improper. In this case, there is no diminution. The Alteration of Terrain Bureau will have to review and has reviewed the project plans to ensure that there's no detriment to downstream flows, volume, or treatment pollutant load within the wetlands. And therefore, there is no detriment to any of the surrounding property values as a function of this project site. The fifth is always the hardest, and that is the unnecessary hardship. And so the question is, no fair and substantial relationship exists between the general public purposes of the ordinance provision and the specific application of the provision to the property. In this case, we have noted that the property is unique in that it has wetlands that sort of crisscross around and create large areas of productive uplands. So that's the special case in this for this specific piece of property. The applicant has been before the planning board, and they have reviewed both an open space design as well as a standard design. And the looping road is preferred and is supported in the subdivision regulations. And so denial of the application before the zoning board here today would pose an unnecessary hardship for a number of different reasons. It would put the applicant at odds with another set of regulations in the town of Nottingham. It would put the applicant at odds with general planning ideals where connectivity is preferred. And it would potentially in one case, not allow the applicant to gain access to highly productive uplands on his property and disallow it from development. And that is something that the state of New Hampshire, I think, takes pretty seriously with respect to the wetlands rules and allowing for crossings to take place when talking about such high productive upland areas. The second question to that unnecessary hardship is that this use is a reasonable one. And I think this question comes back to, is the crossing reasonable? And is the loss of wetland area overcome by other means and methods on site? And in this case, I think that the crossings are reasonable. They are done so at the most minimalistic places possible. We are using all of the newest and cutting edge technology that is practical for this project site. It is in line with all of the best management practices that Department of Environmental Services requests that we do. And is also in line with your Conservation Commission's concerns. And so for those reasons, I think that it is reasonable for this design to move forward to allow for 6,700 square feet of wetlands to be filled to gain access to such large areas of productive uplands. In the fifth criteria, there's a B section, assuming that A and B of the first section are not met. Would you like me to read the B section, or should we wait to see if the board weighs in on A and B first?
You know, we've gone back and forth between voting on these criteria separately. And I think if you want us to, we could do that this evening if we get to a vote, if we get that far. So why don't you save it? And then if you have not convinced them with the first half, you could try the second. Does that make sense to you?
Understood.
Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
So that is the end of your presentation, Mr. Berry. I want to thank you for it. And I would now like to invite any members of the public, either abutters or people in the neighborhood or just anybody, but please state your name, your address, and your relationship, if any, to the parcel. Is there anyone who would like to speak to this application? Who's a member of the public?
Madam Chairman.
Yes?
So my name is Stephen Kerwood. I'm an abutter. My address is 102 Mitchell Road. I'm along the west side of the proposed development here. There are a number of questions that this application raises of concern. There is a bit of a there's an interesting set of contradictions here, because this loss of wetlands to avoid having two cul-de-sacs because of the concerns of the planning board creates a design which I think is in contradiction to the intent of the law to protect wetlands. Wetland protection involves not just handling stormwater, but also the creatures that use this area. And for example, this area is known to have some endangered critters, or amphibians, painted turtles and such. The proposed surfaces are only partially responsive to the need of those creatures, because by separating and by chopping up the rather large wetlands there, and I would urge this committee to go walk the land and see what's there. There's a reason why this hasn't been developed all these many years. It's because of the very large wetlands that's throughout this. I agree with the analysis that some of the other areas are more important, but you know, when it comes to an ecosystem, it's a bit like a family. I mean, which child is more important and less important? The one that makes the less money, is that the one that gets sacrificed, or is the whole family needed? In this case, the reason that the applicants had the two cul-de-sacs here made a lot of sense if you were going to try to avoid the rather large amount of wetlands there. In responding to what the planning board is asking, this is now, I think, not what the Conservation Commission would have seen or approved back when they gave this project its conditional blessing. Let me be clear on that. Could I ask the applicant, is that true? Has the Conservation Commission seen now this plan and given this plan its blessing, as opposed to what it was shown earlier this year?
Mr. Berry, that question is being addressed to you. Could you respond to that, please?
Yes, the Conservation Commission has seen this design and has blessed this design.
At a public hearing?
The Conservation Commission does not meet and have public hearings.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. So they're not at all troubled. They're not concerned about this. What's offered here also, there's no abatement per se for particularly the wildlife here through this. So the kind of gravel detention system for stormwater that comes at the larger crossing doesn't really amount to an abatement of the loss of wetlands there. It's nice to keep out it's nice to, as he said, keep the nitrogen in the water until you can get it into a gaseous form. That's really nice. But in terms of the passage of the critters here, this is being done on the cheap in terms of protecting that wildlife. You can have a crossing that doesn't require this much disturbance. It's called a bridge. You can also use the higher class crossing, which submerges, which creates kind of a faux wetland by having a box culvert below the level of the water, or most of the time. Is certainly better, but it's only done in one part of this. There's another crossing where there's an inferior plan for allowing the wildlife to get across. Another concern here is that may I ask, when was the site survey conducted to be mapped for vernal pools? What year was that conducted? Mr. Berry?
Mr. Kerwin, it's generally acceptable for you to ask questions of the chair, and the chair passes them on to the applicant.
Oh, all right. I'm sorry. Madam Chairwoman, could the applicant clarify when the wetlands consultant surveyed this area for vernal pools and
Certainly.
this particular design?
Mr. Berry, can you answer the question, please?
So there was a vernal pool analysis done in the spring of 2019 by Jack Hayes.
Okay, and Madam Chairwoman, I just want to be clear that the assertion in the wetland analysis that there are no vernal pools here paid attention to this this change in design. If I understand correctly, at the time then of this evaluation, this particular design hadn't been advanced.
Mr. Berry, could you also answer this question for us?
The entire site was reviewed for vernal pools. It's not a survey that's done on a project-specific basis or a design-specific basis. The site is fully evaluated for vernal pools.
Madam Chairwoman, I would submit then that the information submitted by the wetlands specialist is false and misleading. This is land that over the years that I have paid some attention to. Perhaps I've been a trespasser, I don't know. There's not of interest in this hearing tonight. There's a burial area that I've especially paid attention to. We're close to butters, but going all the way up to Sutton, there are some pretty substantial vernal pools that appear in the springtime, and not every year. For example, this year, I didn't see all that much, but in past years, there's been some. I've been a butter. Well, my family has had this property since, I don't know, the deed is maybe 1952 or something. So it takes, so not every year these pools appear. So it would be my understanding that the survey that represents that there are no vernal pools on the development property is misleading and incorrect. Therefore, I would think that in the best interest of having the best practice, that a proper survey be done before any decision is made here. There's also another assertion here, which is based on, quote, 100-year, 50 and 100-year floods. Again, I think some of us abutters know that there have been some pretty crazy floods, and they've happened a lot more frequently than every 100 years. Of course, the Army Corps itself admits that its 100-year standard, because of climate disruption, has now been, is a different ball game. It's also unclear if, because of some of the other, and this is maybe not perhaps, Madam Chairwoman, in your purview, but there are other pressures regarding burial areas and such that may impact the overall ability of the developer to move forward with this plan.
So I might
concerned.
ask you if you have participated in the process so far before the planning board, because these are all issues that would be in their purview.
Yes, but what the comment that I'm about to make is to say that this may not be an accurate representation by the developer of what the developer may be able to do at the end of the day because of those other considerations. So I would think that it would make more sense for your committee to review this after the developer has gotten really clear about the entire parcel and where things may need to go. We've already seen them go from the two cul-de-sac to now this loop situation, and there may be other issues that come along. So I appreciate the planning board effort to look into this, and now the zoning adjustment board as well. Let me briefly summarize in response to the 5 points that are laid out here. Substantial justice is not really necessarily done here because of the misleading, in my view, false and misleading claim by the wetlands assessment of no vernal pools on the property. The values of the surrounding property similarly are diminished because the wildlife that has attracted people here, that adds to our property values here, is going to be diminished and problematic. There is a loss, therefore, in the attractiveness of this property as being a fairly, beautiful wild place along a wild and scenic road. This is an official wild and scenic road in Nottingham. Little enforcement of the provisions of this ordinance result in hardship only in terms of the profitability of this enterprise. And people in the neighborhood and the creatures come before profits. We are supposed to do these things in the public interest. And that, I guess, is your point number one. I'm sorry I took these out of order. When the profit comes in front of the public, it's not in the public interest. And finally, I would say that this developer has done a good job of put a lot of effort into trying to meet the spirit of this ordinance, and I applaud that. But sadly, I think that they've fallen short. I think they're just trying to put too many lots onto this land. if they put fewer lots, they would not have to trash the wetlands the way that this plan calls for. I'm not opposed to building there. I think that this would be wonderful to have. People have to have places to live, and this is a great town. But I think that trying to cram all these houses into this space with all this wetland is going to is not in the public interest. Is not going to help property values. It does help the bottom line of the developer, and I understand why the developer, why Mr. Berry's client is pushing for it. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Chairwoman, that concludes my comments for now.
You're welcome, and thank you, Mr. Kerwood. I just want to say one thing in response to something that you said, and that is that there is no designation called Wild and Scenic Road. There is one, however, called Designated Scenic Road. And maybe
Sorry.
Wild and Scenic is
Apologies.
reserved for some of our rivers, like the Lamprey.
Yes, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I just wanted to make that clear. So I'm going to, since you gave such a thorough testimony, I'm going to ask Mr. Berry, I'm going to let Mr. Berry speak after each person who speaks to his plan, if that is okay with everybody. Mr. Berry, would you like to rebut or address any of the concerns that Mr. Kerwood brought into the board's attention tonight?
Mr. Kerwood asserts that our vernal pool analysis is faulty in some way. We have a certified wetland scientist that reviewed the site during the proper time of year, the assessment of vernal pools on the site. Mr. Kerwood is not a certified wetland scientist and walks the land and seems to know what vernal pools are. I would assert that part of the application process to New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, that our wetland scientist submits vernal pool analyses regularly in support of applications and would know more about vernal pools than Mr. Kerwood or really any of the other abutters. So to say that it's faulty, I believe is improper. The storm events due to climate change, yes, he's correct. We are seeing storm events change, and so we are charged with using the Cornell numbers that they publish on regular basis for current climate changed storm events. And so those changes have already been attributed to and accounted for inside the storm analysis. So what we used to design for a 100-year storm event 10 years ago was probably 5, 6, maybe 7 inches of rain. We are now required over 8 inches of rain in a 24-hour period to analyze for. So those types of climate change and storm event changes have been accounted for in the analysis. I think the question before the board is the diminishment of values, the hardship of the applicant as it relates to the modification and altering of the wetlands. The discussion of the number of lots, the discussion of profitability is really not one for the zoning board to review and decide, insofar that the zoning board in that decision should decide whether or not the crossing of the wetlands and modifying of the wetlands is appropriate given the amount of large areas of uplands that are developable, buildable, and subdividable. And so it's not really a function of whether or not it's profitable for the applicant to cross a wetland or modify the economics of a project. It's the discussion needs to be around whether or not crossing the wetlands is appropriate to gain access to the upland areas. And then there's a brief discussion about the project design and how it may have changed. We entered into a design review discussion prior to any large amount of engineering with the planning board, where we looked at a couple of different layouts, and this layout was determined to be the layout that the planning board asked us to move forward with. And so obviously this is where we've put our efforts from an engineering design basis. We don't anticipate that the design is going to change too much more as part of this project. The planning board has asked for some minor modifications to our plans, and we'll implement those as we move through the process further. The historical aspect that Mr. Kerwood has mentioned in the past has been reviewed by our archaeologist, and we will have further information for the planning board the next time we see them. It is really a discussion for that board and the Division of Historical Resources.
Madam Chairwoman, I'd like to respond since it was a direct attack made on my qualifications here. Can't hear you. You have silenced yourself.
I'm sorry, my dogs were making noise, so I did silence myself. This is not a debate. You will get another chance to speak, but I'm going to let any other members of the public who wish to speak next. Is there anybody else here who wishes to speak to this application? Patricia Roy, is that how you say your name? You're silenced. You need to unmute yourself, or Joanna needs to.
Okay, there we go. I did it. I figured it out. Okay. I just have a question regarding the wetland survey that was done in 2019. I remember early on, and to be fair, I'm not totally against the development. This is a question. Early in this year, I believe it was, there was some discussion about having the wetland survey, and that it had been done in 2019, but it had been done in the fall of 2019. And it was pretty much decided that, or it was discussed that it wasn't really the most appropriate time to do something like that, because the fall is definitely the driest time of the year, and that there was some plan to do it again in the spring of this year, which was pretty dry anyway. But you said that the survey, he said that the survey was done in 2019.
He said the survey of vernal pools, the
Right.
search for vernal pools. That's
Right.
what he was talking about, that it was done in the spring of 2019. Is that correct, Mr. Berry?
I don't think he said, yeah. It was done in the spring of 2019?
I believe that's what he testified to.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't get that. I thought he just said in 2019, and I assumed it was the same one that they discussed having to redo since it was done in the fall when everything's pretty dry.
That's really not our purview either.
Oh,
here.
okay.
We are
Okay.
supposed to focus on the applications request before us, which is not the entirety of the subdivision. Most of that belongs to the planning board. Our purview is a variance for these two wetland crossings.
Oh, I thought that was part of that.
Anyone else wish to address this application or this applicant?
Yeah, hello, my name is Todd Marvel. I'd like to speak.
I'd like you to state your address, sir.
It is 4 Sutton Street
Thank you.
in Nottingham. I'm in a butter.
Right, I know Sutton Street is near.
I just want to speak up for Mr. Kerwood. I know he has quite an extensive education, and
I know that Mr. Kerwood actually is quite famous.
in this debate. Not only that, but there's really not two wetlands. There's one large wetland back there, and there's extensive dredging and filling. It's not simple. 6,700 square feet is quite an extensive project. The applicant has said, that it's only culverts and it's only the bridges, it's only the access. But then there's detention centers, and there's quite a bit of other work that's involved in all that. The extensive detention centers do not really treat. He said they treat, it allows the nitrogen to gas off, but it doesn't get rid of the phosphorus, it doesn't get rid of the oils, it doesn't get rid of the other stuff that's there that's caused by the roads that are proposed and the access to these highlands, supposedly. They're not really highlands, by the way. But the design is to maximize the construction on the other side of the wetlands. The alteration, the applicant described it as possibly being like a shovel. It's a 6,700 square foot shovel. That's not really indicative, and I think the applicant is candy coating what's going on. there's a lot of things here that been talked about that aren't in front of this board. But I do want to say that an independent survey would go a long way. I do believe that there are vernal pools on the property. I've walked it also. I implore the board to not act quickly and to do some education and to look at all the facts and not just accept what the applicant has said as far as the comments that he's had to respond to. And that should all be above board, and it should all be put in front of the public. And this should not be rushed.
This is a public hearing. This is in front of the public right now.
But he has not presented, he has presented hearsay. What he said is been those comments. And I don't think you should act on that. I think you should see the comments and see what the DES has to say and make a rational, thoughtful decision.
As the town of Nottingham.
For the town of Nottingham, you have the ability to protect the wetlands. This has been put before you, whether you like it or not. Do you know what I mean? You have the ability to do the right thing and to study and figure out what the right thing is.
Thank you. Mr. Kerwood, you wanted to say something further? Mr. Kerwood, can you hear me?
Yes, just simply to respond to the unnecessary disrespect by Mr. Berry. I own a pair of eyes. I've seen these vernal pools. People make mistakes, and I believe that this report is in a mistake, that the analysis is incorrect. And it's my request to the board is to come and walk the land yourselves. I believe one of your members suggested it might be useful to come and take a look. And come and take a look when, to put a point on it, when vernal pools appear. That's the springtime when the snow is melting.
We can't legally wait that long, Mr. Kerwood. We are subject to the law.
Madam Chairwoman, you have the power to say no then, in the face of incomplete information, and I believe false information, you have the power to say no. And his assertion is no stronger, carries no more weight than mine as an abutter who's observed this, and other witnesses that you may call who've observed vernal pools there. Just because he says, oh, they're not there, and he pulls out a piece of paper, part of it is dated from, well, it doesn't matter. You're the ones to decide. It's not my role to tell you how you should decide this, but
do you wish to
I do
share
believe
your
you should consider the
credentials with
evidence in
board?
front of you. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Something happened to the level.
Do you wish to share your credentials with the board and the public here? I mean, that was stated earlier.
I think my credentials as a person who's an abutter, who's been well aware of what's been going on this property for, I don't know, I'm 72, so I was first here as a 2-year-old, off and on. I haven't lived here all the time. I think that's probably the most important part. I happen to have an appointment at Harvard University in the Environmental Science and Public Policy Department, and I've looked at this sorts of things. But I think that my training as simply being a human being living on Mitchell Road is stronger than that. Look, I'm not opposed to this development, but it needs to be done right. It needs to be done right. And the critters in there need to be protected. And, you know, the occasional big gush that sometimes comes down Mitchell Road needs to be protected. So I guess that's all that I want to say, except I do think that respect is called for in these proceedings. And, you know, I'm not calling Mr. Berry unqualified, inappropriate for this. I'm not attacking his credentials. I'm saying that he's working out. So he's been given some consultations. Some consultants have given him, I think, incorrect information. And I don't think the board should act on that.
Thank you. Mr. Berry, are there any other members of the public who wish to speak to this application at this time? I don't see anyone, so I'm going to turn the floor back over to Mr. Berry for his final comment, if he has one. It's not required.
No, I have really no further comment.
Okay. Thank you. So
Madam Chair.
I'm now going to close the public hearing.
Madam Chair, I have a couple additional questions, if I may.
Yeah, I'm only closing the public hearing. The board may still ask questions, Kevin,
Thank you.
and you may have the floor.
Mr. Berry, I don't see stated on the map the size of the lots. Are they like 2-acre minimum?
Yes, they're 2-acre minimum. They meet all of the local requirements.
Okay. Do you happen to know if the Nottingham road agent has reviewed this or other plan options at all?
I don't know if the road agent was consulted as part of the open space design.
Okay.
Johanna's shaking her head, yes.
Okay.
But he has commented on this design, yes.
On this particular one? Okay. Do you happen to know if there's any requirement to have this as a no salt area during the winter months?
No, there is no such requirement that I know of.
Okay. You mentioned in the area 1 that there was reasonable water flow, if I recall.
Yes, yes, sir.
Is that flow, does that cross, well, it might be either Mitchell Road or Sutton Street, via a culvert?
No, that flow in crossing 1 continues down to the east away from Mitchell Road.
And it shows wetland going down to Mitchell Road. So I'm just curious where the flow on the map, it goes north or south or top to bottom. And I'm just curious where the flow comes from and goes to.
So the flow comes from Mitchell Road at that little tip as it touches the edge of the road and continues down into the large wetland area.
Okay. So it doesn't cross Mitchell Road, if I understand you correctly.
It does not.
Okay. So as I stated, Madam Chair, early on, this is a site that I would be looking to do a site walk, and I just haven't had a chance. And until I do so, I would be abstaining from voting at this time.
How many board members are left here? 4, so that would leave 3 people. Do any other board members have questions, comments?
Well, I have one question, mainly for Joanna. She was talking about, now, this is before us because of our ordinance, the way our ordinance is written, and they're going to post this, or they're going to change this ordinance, Joanna?
This ordinance is up, or this part of the ordinance is up for a change, and that is being reviewed again at the next meeting.
So possibly, I think, is the answer.
Yes.
Is there any verbiage to the change at this time, or is that still?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again?
I was just curious if there's any verbiage on what the change might be at this time, or that won't be established for another month or 2.
There is verbiage. It is on our the planning board page, but please keep in mind that this won't be applicable to this particular case because they are locked in the ordinance as it is now.
Understood.
My computer battery was nearly dead. Okay, so the ordinance, there's been no draft of the proposed changes, if any, right, Joanna?
There is a proposed draft, but you
There-
had stepped away, even though the ordinance will change or is proposed to change. This particular case is locked into this ordinance as it is now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Berry.
I don't mean to contradict Joanna, but I think in a case where an ordinance is to the benefit of the applicant, I don't know that we'd actually be locked into it, but we might want to just look into that.
Okay, yeah, we could definitely look into that.
So what is the will of the board at this point in time? Assuming there are no more clarifying questions needing to be raised. I know that some members are tired. This is probably the latest meeting we've ever had. Does the board wish to take the time to have a site walk, take the time to speak with any other persons of expertise about this particular application, or take the time to have a discussion with the town attorney regarding our article and regarding this case? We have been offered that by the town administrator. If we were to offer it, the town administrator would want us to submit whatever questions we wish to submit to the town attorney, which I would not ask you to do tonight. It's too late. But if that were the preference of the board, then I would, give you a day or two to get those to me, and I will send them to the town attorney. Does that meet my requirements, Joanna? If we gather them and I send them all to whatever attorney is working with us on this case. I don't even know who it is at this point.
I believe so, but I don't know if that is how Mr. Berry would feel about that.
Mr. Berry doesn't have a say in whether we continue the case for those kinds of reasons. He does have a say in whether somebody wishes to make a motion to approve or disapprove his application tonight. He does have a say in whether he wants to wait a month due to the fact that there's not a full board. I think those are the two options that the board has, at least that's my understanding. If anyone has any different information, let's hear it. And let's, how do you board members wish to proceed? Do you wish to go to a motion, either to accept, reject, or continue, or what?
Bonnie, my opinion at this point is to continue the case so that Kevin is able to walk the site, and I might do the same because, like Kevin, I am more inclined to
abstain.
Well,
you okay, Teresa?
Yeah, the only.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Okay, take your time. Terry?
Is Teresa down or she was coughing?
I think she's recovered, recovering.
I don't understand why. I don't understand why the model didn't go with the two cul-de-sacs. I've got the ordinance here in front of me, and there's nothing that's set against there being two separate
subdivision. It's in the subdivision regulations, not the ordinance, I believe.
That is correct on page 57. And it just says that it may serve no more than 20 residential units in a conventional subdivision. And then it talks about the length of it, but it doesn't prohibit it from being in a smaller subdivision like this one. So having that information before me and seeing that there is an option for not going across the wetlands, I would like to see the site to understand why they've chosen to go this way.
So I heard Mr. Berry say that it's because the planning board preferred it.
I heard him say that too, and having just come off the planning board and having been on the planning board when he brought these up before, I do understand that there are safety considerations for those, but it has been for longer cul-de-sacs, not short ones like these would be. And they would be serving, it would be serving only a few homes, so it wouldn't have, like the cul-de-sac that they already have out there, or the lollipop as they've liked to call it during the meetings before. And it would save them from going into wetlands and dredging and filling all of this land. So anyway, as it stands at this point, I prefer to continue the case.
Do you wish to put that into a motion?
I haven't heard Terry's comment.
Well, my concern is, if we continue it, we've spent an hour and a half. We've heard all of Mr. Berry's explanations on a lot of things and the abutters and stuff. But I'm just concerned, I know Raylene was with us and she left us, at 9 when this case started. But Kevin's on here as an alternate, and I would prefer Kevin to stay on as an alternate, only because, I want to keep the board somewhat the same so that we don't have to go over all this again for another 2 hours with a new person coming on. So that's
I agree with you. I agree with you 100% on that.
I accept.
You accept
What
to
did you
stay?
say, Kevin?
Yes, Madam Chair, I would sit on the board if that's appropriate.
It is appropriate. I thought I seated you for the whole evening because we do have a regular board member who is totally missing tonight. So you are seated for all 3 of these hearings, Kevin.
Right, but will he be seated for the continuance? That's all.
He should be. It's much better for it to be
right
in front of the same board. And then what's Peter going to say about that? Well, let's not go there.
I agree. Let's not. The
Also,
other
if
thing
we
is,
hire consultants, if we go to some consultants in a continuance situation, he would not be a seated member of the board. He's going to have the same thing. Never mind.
I think we also need to set a date and time to do the walk so that Mr. Berry or somebody can be there to show us where this point is and where that point is, kind of guide us around, because I don't want to be walking all over this property and getting myself lost.
Yeah, there are alligators too, Teresa.
Hey, you know what? There might be better things happening in life, right?
Mr. Berry, would you be willing to do that, to sort of host a walkthrough of the land and show us how the road will go and where these wetlands crossings are and so forth?
Absolutely.
Okay, so in order to wrap this up and for any of us to go to bed, I still need a motion of some kind.
All right, Madam Chair, I move that we continue case 20-014VA as posted until a date certain, which would be our next meeting in December? Correct?
I'd say yes. Do you have a date for that, Joanna?
December 15th at 7 p.m. I have my calendar.
Good on you.
Can we add in there continued with the existing board?
Yes.
Yes.
And could this be the first case, Joanna, so that Mr. Berry doesn't have to sit again through the whole 2 other hearings in order to be heard again? It seems
Yes,
kind of
it
fair
can.
to me. So is there a second to Teresa's motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Terry. So a motion has been made and seconded to continue case number, keep grabbing-
20114.
Thank you.
Yeah.
To our December meeting, which is December 15th at 7 o'clock, and that this same board, these same 4 persons be seated. 1, 2, 3, 4. Kevin Bassett, Teresa Bascom, Terry Bonzer. I guess you have to be a B to get on the zoning board, and myself.
I mean, if we could have Ray King, because he deserved to have a full board of 5.
If we could have Raylene.
Yeah, I mean, she was here tonight. She started with us at least.
She didn't hear any of this case though, and the whole point of being,
But he's entitled to 5 board members. So.
if he wishes, so let's let him make that decision. In the middle of this motion, Mr. Berry, would you feel more comfortable having Raylene, who was here earlier tonight, as a 5th board member? She didn't hear any of your case. She was here for the other 2. Or would you prefer to go before this board who has heard the whole case? So she will be coming in.
I guess I would prefer a 5-member board, Madam Chair. If Raylene, maybe at the next meeting, she can decide whether or not she needs to abstain.
Correct. Good point.
Okay.
So would you be sure to also invite Raylene, if that's agreeable to everybody? All right, so a motion has been made and seconded to continue this case to the December 15th meeting at 7 o'clock, with this case being heard first. This case being heard in front of these same 4 people who are still here and Raylene Shippey Rice. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye, and I will begin aye. Terry?
I say aye.
Teresa?
Aye.
Kevin, who I can't see? Aye. So that's 4 votes to nothing. We will continue your case, Mr. Berry. Thank you for your patience this evening. This has been a long night for all of us. We're a lot of us are 9 o'clock to bed people. Not me, but many people here are.
Well, thank you for everybody's input and consideration tonight.
You're welcome.
Madam
Bonnie,
Chair, I will circulate an
Thank you,
email
Madam
to
Chairman.
The
Thank
site
you.
walk.
You're
Okay,
welcome.
thank you, Joanna.
Thank you.
Joanna, we still would need a motion to adjourn, people, unless we have other business. We have other business we have to talk about tonight that
No.
can't be. Joanna?
The only other one was discussing the application meeting schedule, which I didn't get any comments on from anybody else. So I think we're okay.
Okay,
And then the minutes, but that can be tabled.
that can be tabled. We'll do the minutes. We'll take them up the next time.
I move to
So now I
adjourn.
will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Any second?
I think that was a second, but I'll second it.
Okay. A motion has been made and seconded to adjourn this hearing, to adjourn this meeting. We've already continued the hearing. To adjourn this meeting. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Did you
Good
say
night,
aye?
everybody.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I haven't said aye yet, but I will. How do we get a date and time for the site walk?
Site walk.
Joanna's.
We're going to ask those of you who are the busiest, who have the least flexible time to, we need to do it before it snows, I would say. So as soon as possible in the next week, if that's agreeable with everyone. And I don't know who does not have a flexible time schedule, like work-wise and so forth. Is everybody flexible?
Can I suggest, Joanna, is it appropriate for you to reach out to the applicant and see if
When he can.
a weekday or a Saturday is possible, either one, and then we can go from there?
Yes, I will generate an email and get that circulated to you all, including the applicant.
Because don't don't say aye yet, Kevin, because I have one more thing to bring up, and that is, do any of you feel like we need to consult with a dredge and fill person, an attorney, or what was the third thing I thought of? Any kind of expert that would help us make a decision in this case.
Since the
Would bring
planning-
information. Pardon?
Since the planning board reached out, as a minimum, I'd like to know what questions they asked, and what the answers were.
Asked of what?
Didn't they reach out to the attorney, did I hear?
That might have been from Joanna. I don't know what the planning board does, and I don't remember. Did they speak to an attorney? It was the town administrator who reached out to me through Joanna and said if we wish to consult with an attorney on this, he would make the town attorney available, but by this means, we would all come up with questions, you would submit them to me, and we'd submit them in writing to him.
Understood, but my question is, what did the planning do in the same regard? Did they reach out?
The planning board reached out to the attorney in regards to whether the zoning ordinance directly said that they needed to go for a variance for a dredge and fill for this purpose. But that doesn't answer any of your questions as a board.
Okay, so they didn't ask any prudent questions of the actual case.
Correct.
Okay. So to answer your question, Madam Chair, I think we should get some guidance from the appropriate expert.
So what kind of expert do you think we should get some guidance from?
Well, you mentioned legal.
Legal?
And you mentioned environmental.
Environmental. I would maybe, that's one of the reasons I asked him about the Conservation Commission's, his meeting with the Conservation Commission. And he was quite thorough about that, more than anybody else has ever been in front of this
I
board.
was hoping he would go forward to the state with multiple plans. That's what I was thinking while I was reviewing this. Is this the only option? And then the state would then alter it to make it, appropriate, but why isn't there 2 or 3 other options to consider? And I'd say initially, and then let the state and the experts, say, that one is better than that one because, and then sort of whittle it down at the expert level, not our level.
So that might be an appropriate question for us to ask DES. And Kevin, maybe you should be the one to call them and say, is this type of a plan, in your opinion, more environmentally friendly? Because really that's what we're concerned about, is disturbing the wetlands. Would it be better to have 2 cul-de-sacs, or would it be better to have 1 road?
And there's probably many other
Different answers
options that I'm
depending on what hat you're wearing. Right.
Yeah, I'm probably not privy to other possible options that they would be. In other words, if you gave it to them on a clean sheet of paper, what design would they come up with? Would be one of my questions, So to answer your question, yes, I think some guidance would be prudent.
Does anyone else have any comments before we let Kevin finish the voting on adjourning? So as board members, if you could think about this overnight, and maybe by the end of 48 hours, send me your questions. And I will send them to the attorney, or send them to Joanna. I mean, I don't know what, we don't want to do this illegally, Joanna.
We send to Joanna, right?
I think we need to send it to Joanna. And then she can send them to me, right? And I can submit them to the attorney. We can see if there are any duplicate questions or questions that can be joined together because they're
Send them
close.
to me, and then I will compile them all into one, and then BCC you all to make sure you all know what they are. And then if there's any more to add, we'll add to it, and then we'll go from there.
Sounds good. Does that sound okay to everybody?
Yes, good night.
Kevin?
I approve.
Oh, you approve of the adjournment?
Yes,
Good
ma'am.
night.